And good evening. Today is February the 4th. Right now it is 7:34, and I'm calling to order this evening's meeting of the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission. For the benefit of those who have not participated in a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our procedures are as follows. The Secretary will read the legal notice of the meeting as published in local newspapers. The applicant will be invited to come forward and present the case, explaining to the Commission and others present what is being requested of this property. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. First, there'll be clarifying questions from the commissioners, then there'll be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. Next, we'll ask those who want to support the application to come forward. Second, we'll ask those opposing the application to come forward. As this is a public meeting, it must be recorded. It'll be necessary for speakers to identify themselves by stating their name and address before addressing the commission. The applicant will then be free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearing and the regular meeting, during which time the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision, and the commission has a right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Office at 203-453-8039 after 9 a.m. Seated tonight are the following members of the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission. We have Tom Cost, I'm Rich Meyer, Josh Hirschman, Walter Corbiere, Richard Wallace, George Underhill, Phil Johnson, Frank DeAndrea, Chuck Andres is joining us tonight. Reggie Reed and Sally Berezowski is here, and George Crowell is here. Shannon Gale is doing our recording for us. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Is it in order to say which members are seated?
I was going to do that after you read, but...
Legal notice, Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on February 4th, 2015 at 7:30 p.m. at the Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, Monunketuck Room, 2nd floor, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, for the following purposes. Number 1, Guilford Agricultural Society, 111 Lovers Lane, map 40, lot 138, zone R3, special permit modification of original special permit approved May 17, 1989 to allow permanent use of barn and pavilion, Article 10. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this hearing, persons may attend and be heard, and written communications will be received. Dated at Guilford, Connecticut, this 14th day of January 2015. Richard Meyer, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're going to seat one of our alternates. Ray Bauer's not here tonight. Phil, you're a lucky winner tonight, so you're going to be seated as a member and voting. George, you're going to participate but not vote tonight, okay? Okay. George, we are mixing the order up. Is that correct?
With your permission, yeah.
Well, I would love to do it. So why don't we do that? We don't have to open a public hearing on a site plan. We just start with the site plan.
Your regular meeting, and I will see when the regular session.
Okay, so...
So moved.
All right. Oh, that's right, we have to approve the change to the agenda. So, there we go. All those in favor of...
Aye.
Okay, good. So let's start off with the site plan. We have Stephen, and forgive my pronunciation, Ucella, at 25 Water Street, map 39, lot 85, zone 1. Site plan revision, change use of first floor space to add personal service establishment and gallery. Receive and take action. Who's here to tell us about this?
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm Stephen Ucello.
Why don't you come on up and join the party?
Hey, my name is Stephen Ucello, and I own and operate the Bird Nest Salon Gallery here in Guilford at 118 Whitfield Street. 3 years ago, it was an office space, and I found it and came across it, and I turned it back into a retail space that had been in the 70s, the Corn Crib. Many of you know it as the Corn Crib.
Yes.
So I've been in business for 3 years, and I'm looking to expand to a location that gives us a little more visibility and a second salon show. So in the Corn Crib, I only have one. I'm going to be opening, it's called Salon Suites. So I'm looking to have a independent contractor, a second chair, and 2 to 3 times the gallery space. I have pictures of the property, and the site map that I included is in here as well. But it gives everyone an idea. So where I'm looking to move, there's a lot more foot traffic and retail on Water Street there in that location. I'm looking to join that end of the community and stay here in Guilford. The gallery represents local artists and beyond. Currently we have a roster of 7 to 10 artists from Connecticut to Venice Beach, California. So and we're looking to expand that as well. So it gives us the opportunity here in this space to have 2 main galleries, like I said, 2 to 3 times the gallery space, a second salon suite, which would operate unto itself, with a salon sink and a bathroom. And on the opposite side of the house, there's another salon suite, which would have its own bathroom, does have its own bathroom, and its own sink as well. So on the inside, I'm going to give this to you, maybe you could pass that around for me. What needs to be done is pretty minimal with the property, with the exception of installing 2 salon sinks. And my landlord, Luis Carrera, owns the property. He said that there was a gallery there at one point, but I don't recall that being there.
This is very exciting.
It is exciting. The property has 3 main entrances, one on either side of the house. The 2 side entrances go into the studio spaces, which would be hair salon studio suites. And the front door is shared at the moment with the upstairs, and that opens to the gallery spaces. And currently there is a tenant that lives on the 2nd floor that shares the common area and the foyer. We have the potential to, again, in the future, grow my business and move up in the house and include different practitioners, massage therapists, stylists. Again, the model is salon suite, so it's not your average salon environment. So anyway, that's the case.
Good.
And we're looking to take occupancy, April 1st.
Nice. Well, good. We're glad you're staying in town. And we're glad that you're succeeding. Hard work always pays off. It's good for you.
Thank you.
This is between the flower shop and Augers.
It is, actually currently Echo Salon, who is my neighbor, will be my neighbor again. She took over the flower shop about a year or so ago.
Yes.
And Augers, the pub, is on the opposite side of us. Would be.
Parking's not an issue.
No, parking is street parking on both sides of the street, which is better than on Whitfield Street, less obstruction. There's parking, limited parking for the building, and also the municipal area that's adjacent to the building,
Yep.
which is great.
Good. Phil? Frank? Petrella? No more questions? It is. I kind of like it too. You want to do a motion now? We don't normally do like,
We're on the site plans now, so yeah, that's in order.
yeah, so why don't you do that? You do it.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a change of use for Stephen Usello, 25 Water Street, map 39, lot 85, as shown on application dated 1/14/2015. This application is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the zoning code.
Second.
Battling it out. Everyone wants to help you here. All right, any other discussion?
We're good with the septic?
Yeah, that's all.
There's no letters.
I sat with, I had met with, I'm sorry, his name at the zoning office.
Dennis
Yes. And he looked into it, and he's approved it. He gave me a informal approval, checked all the water usage and the septic for the property. The landlord at one point enlarged that septic to the largest capacity possible, so he assured me it was fine.
Reggie, do you have any letters for us? Reg? Any letters?
Reggie, in terms of the water and the parking, this
Parking is fine.
and the water,
The health director has looked at this, which is what Stephen was telling you, and he has no objections.
He just didn't give us a letter. He doesn't.
And Stephen, you have a one station, a one sink salon.
Currently I operate a one sink salon, and he checked the water usage with me at the corn crib versus water usage happening at the property currently. And then he just kind of took my usage, doubled it, and it still came under the amount that can be used at that property for 25 Water Street.
Good. Perfect. Wonderful. Wish I
At least put these in the record, or you give them back?
That's fine.
That's why we throw them in the
We
record.
gotta put those
We'll
in.
always have those pictures.
yeah, we
It's
have to
different.
put those in.
Forever and ever now. All right. Everyone done? All questions done?
Call
I
the
had
question.
a question for you guys. In regard to the signage, I think I'm able to replace the current sign that was there in front of the building on that post with a comparable size sign and without any trouble. I do have a plan for the future. I'll have to come back for a plaque on the front of the house, shutters. And I understand that has to be taken to a different committee. This house is not a part of the historic district.
I know that, Stephen, but you still have to submit a sign permit application, and the design review committee has to look at it.
Separate.
The sign committee.
And is that for the sign with where the existing post and
All
sign
all
was?
signage, yes.
Okay, great.
Even though you're changing and not making it any bigger, you still have to submit.
Will do. Thank you.
All set?
Yeah,
All right.
that's not before us right now.
No. All right. So, no more questions? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Good work, sir.
And gentlemen.
Thank you. Good work. All right, Guilford Surgery Center LLC, 246 Goose Lane, is familiar address, map 75, lot 53, zone I2, installation of generator. Receive and take action. Someone's coming.
I'll make my way up here.
This is great.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Joe Wren, representing the applicant, Guilford Surgery Center LLC. With us representing Guilford Surgery Center LLC is Bill Mulhall, he's here with us this evening.
Sir, could you put the A-frame over here
Sure.
so we got the, so we can, the camera can see it too.
This site plan application is for what we all know as the glass building, Innovation Park, 246 Goose Lane. The surgery center will be occupying approximately 12,000 to 13,000 square feet of this space in the existing building that is currently unoccupied. And based on the nature of their business, one-day surgery and so forth, it's critical that they have backup power.
Kind of important.
So to the north side of the building, we looked at various alternatives around the site close to the building. To the south of the building, we have the CLMP easement. We have the existing gas meters, which is not good to have a source of ignition next to the gas meters. And there's also a transformer at that location. So we looked at the north side, and although we get very close to the 100-foot inland wetland buffer from the pond that's to the rear of the building, we are just outside of that, and the generator is outside of the 40-foot side yard setback as well. This property here is used as residential, but it is zoned industrial I2. And we do comply with that setback in this area. The pad is just over the setback, but the actual generator is not over the setback. And the generator is flush with the ground. The electrical rooms are on the far side of the building, the south side of the building, so the conduits will need to run down through the building to get to the electrical room, or overhead to get to the electrical room. But again, we investigated the south side first and decided the north side was the best place to be. There is screening around the generator. We did provide in your package the specifications of that screening. There's a louvered screen on the outside, and there's 3-foot clear inside from the generator to the screening, where there'll be crushed stone, and then the generator will actually sit on a reinforced concrete pad. It is, the generator is 150 kV.
How's it fuel?
Excuse me?
How is it fueled?
It's, the fuel tank is self-contained and it sits below the generator.
What?
It's a diesel, I believe. Diesel, yeah.
Do you need any secondary containment, or your?
It's a self-contained unit. That's one of the first questions that I had for them, because I knew that would come up. And it is, the way they make these now, and I think even the code requires, is that they're self-contained. There's a leak in the fuel tank, it's contained right in the system.
Cool. Cool. What else you got? Anything?
That's it. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple.
Frank?
I think it's smart to move it to the rear. I think it's a certain amount of feet you have to be from the gas meters anyway, which I don't think they'd be able to put it anywhere near there, so.
Yeah. They don't have a lot of choices.
There is a photo of the north side of the building too. You can see from that photo, including in the reflection off the glass building, there is a pretty dense white pine and arborvitae buffer along that northern property line as well through there. And you can see there's really nothing in the way. It's kind of the perfect space for it.
Looks like the perfect space.
Just off that west end of the sidewalk.
Phil? Looks like a good spot for it. Yep. George, anything?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what is the running time on that? Can it run out of fuel?
Probably have a
More
backup
than I do
supply
about
on
that,
its
though.
way as soon as.
Well, I have one at home, so I'm just wondering, trying to make them better.
It's a pretty decent
My
size.
name's Bill Baldwin. It's required to run for 24 hours, just by virtue of federal code. So it has enough fuel that it should allow us to run for 24 hours.
Good. Now, well, yeah, you'll have an oil truck coming for diesel fuel, so this is great.
Yeah.
What's your elevation from the pond in the back?
The elevation difference,
The elevation of the concrete platform or of the generator apparatus?
it's a pretty gentle slope. It's not very steep. You can probably see in that photograph of
Yeah.
us, the site plan that we had, the as-built does not have elevations on it. You can see, looking through that photo that was just passed around with the picnic table and the perch tree, it's very flat
Yeah.
there all the way back to the pond, so there's no...
The distance from the generator to the pond is, you have it pretty much exactly because of the,
Yes.
100 feet.
it's 100 feet.
Yeah, we have a sidewalk to the east, we have the 100-foot review line to the
Yeah.
west, and then we have the building setback line to the north, so
So
we're
it's
just,
it's just
just
across the.
and we had 10 feet from the building as well, so bring all those together, it fits right where it is.
And so your distance from the nearest adjoining property owner is hundreds of feet. There's a property owner to the northeast past a gravel driveway.
Well, there's a house on this property, there's actually
Correct.
a large tree house up on this corner, the southwest corner of the property right here, but the house is more towards the front. As I said earlier, that is a residential use, but it is in the I-2 zone. And we do conform to that 40-foot side yard setback
So it's 40 feet from their yard as well.
from the property line.
No, I don't. What's that?
I'll make a motion. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a site plan revision for the installation of a generator for Guilford Surgery Center, 246 Goose Lane, map 75, lot 53 as shown. Site plan prepared for Guilford Surgery Center dated December 18, 2014 by Indigo Land Design. This application is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the zoning code.
Seconded? All right, any other discussion, or we know what we need to know?
I can say from, our property has a 135,000 kV generator on it, and it's about maybe 40 feet from my building. And when you're inside the building, you can hardly hear the generator running. It's that quiet.
I'm
So
sure-
I don't think the noise will be an issue.
Yeah, no, I'm sure if I were their neighbor and they had power and I didn't, I'd go in their building.
Yeah, we'd want
Stay
to
warm.
plug into it.
Exactly. You read my mind. All right, so anything else? We're all set?
I was just wondering, does it purge itself on a regular basis?
You mean like exercise itself and run?
I'm sure it does.
It should on a weekly basis kick on.
It exercises itself.
It's required to be tested once a week.
Once a week?
Yep.
And that's
for 30
automatic?
minutes.
Good. Okay, last chance.
But that's not a significant nuisance for us,
No.
for the one prospective neighbor that might be bothered by.
Yeah, they're not gonna run it at 1 in the
Then
morning.
it's Sunday.
There is an elevation difference here too. This does slope up, so some of it will get softened by the ground there. And like I said, there is a mature evergreen buffer right in that corner of that property as well.
Last chance. All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, it just came so easy tonight. Let's have some trouble.
You're on a roll.
On a roll.
Started.
And again, forgive my pronunciation, Sudesh Kumar, 1795 Boston Post Road, Unit B, map 79, lot 36, zone SCW, change of use from Chelsea Sleep and Guilford Sporting Goods to a veterinary facility. Receive and take action. Sir, what do you got?
Good evening, members of the planning and zoning officers and the members of the public. My name is Dr. Sudesh Kumar. I'm a veterinarian. I own the Durham Veterinary Hospital in Durham, your northerly neighbor. And I'm in the process of acquiring 1795 Boston Post Road, Unit B, formerly in Parkview Plaza, right across from the Land Rover dealership on the exit ramp 57. It used to be a mattress store. The building is vacant since last at least 3 years, and we intend to open a small animal veterinary hospital in that building, and to provide comprehensive veterinary medical care for dogs and cats. And the application is for allowing us to do inside modifications in the box to put necessary reception, waiting area, exam rooms, surgery rooms, etc. And that's why I have the application.
Good. Do you have any drawings or anything? Or
We submitted the site plan
we
with
did?
the application.
Just don't know where they are.
This is,
Yeah, the site.
I don't know if you're aware of this building.
So the parking is okay, parking is, I remember that was tight.
There are 95 parking spots at the parking plaza, and under the bylaws of the association, there are 10 dedicated parking spots for this unit. And at the veterinary hospital, we are going to be by appointment only facility, not a retail facility. But we also will have access to the upper level parking spots. They will be available, I think, as I have been told by the president of the association, in May or June, after they have finished the landscaping for the new mall coming up on the third part. But we do have 10 dedicated parking spots for that unit under the bylaws of the association. That can only be used by us. And at our hospital in Durham, we have been there since last 55 years. And as a small 1 or 2 doctor practice, we have not needed more than 10 parking spots at our hospital over there. So as such, we do not anticipate any need for excessive parking space. But we know that we have guaranteed parking spots for 10 weeks. So we can have the staff, myself, we can park upstairs. There is a ramp, entry into the building from the 3rd floor. And that opens up all the parking, and we can leave the 10 spots for the pet owners as they come to see us.
Good, good. Questions? Frank, you got anything?
I do. So is there going to be any type of outdoor facility to house any of the animals that possibly come in for surgery or anything, or to?
No. We are not going to do anything outside the building. This is not going to be a boarding facility. This is not going to be a facility that offers regular grooming like we have at the Pet Valley food store in downtown. Our purpose is to strictly provide professional veterinary medical care for small animals. So we are not going to be doing any husbandry, for example.
You don't have to.
Will there be overnight staying of animals that have surgery and procedures?
Yes. So we anticipate, or we do normally do, overnight recuperation of patients that have underwent surgical procedures, or patients who are recovering from any sickness. So those patients will be kept overnight for recovery at the hospital, like any other standard veterinary hospital.
What's the occupancy on the 2nd and 3rd floor?
It's empty. Used to be rooms.
There's a fitness place over there, personal training that's in operation. A lot of it is empty. And then there were some apartments.
Third floor is a fitness place. There are no residential apartments in the building.
In the back, there weren't
No.
no longer.
One unit is for sale, and one unit is occupied by the president of the association, who has his accounting business. And 2 units, I think, are owned by the business that owns the liquor store. But as such, as far as I know, there is no residential use allowed in that building.
It was a nice location.
And you're not concerned about the noise from either side for the animals, and obviously you're the doctors.
The design of the building, the good thing about the building is it has 13 feet high ceilings. And there's a drop ceiling at 10 feet level. So I intend to design the drop ceiling in such a way that uses ceiling tiles that will have noise mitigation up to 70 decibels. We are also considering the layout of the floor, the flooring, and the walls will be designed in such a way that we have minimum noise. Since we will not have multiple animals in the facility, at any given time we may have 2 or 3 pets coming to the hospital because it's strictly on an appointment basis. So since it's not going to be housing 10, 15, 20 dogs for boarding, for example, we do not anticipate noise. But as you know, if you're a dog, you have to bark. So
And I was more thinking actually about the effect on the animals from the exits and things like that, but if you're not...
That's a very good question. If you look at the building, the parking is in front of the building, which is towards the exit ramp. And the other good part is, since everybody's exiting, the speed comes to around 20-25 miles. So we are located between 2 streets in Durham, where the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. And anybody who's exiting or entering the highway will be significantly slowing down to go to the red light. And as you can see, the highway is on the other side of the car dealership. So as such, we are not concerned about the noise from the street.
Thank you.
One question, please. Will you be providing a retail operation for animal food, or pet foods, or accessories?
No.
So there's no retail operation?
The only retail we do, even now in Durham, is the items that our clients cannot purchase from the retail store. For example, we will have patients that will be diabetics, that may have special needs, heart patients. Those dogs and cats need some prescription diets, but that's a very limited repertoire of foods that only our clients get from us. We will not be offering any retail items like leashes or collars because that's not our business.
So you're a pharmacy on premises.
Right.
Any need to have any septic improvements or upgrades?
Very good question. We got the septic system inspected by A&W Sanitation. There are 4 septic tanks, and I think there are 1,000 gallon each. The septic system is in great shape. Since we are not going to be doing any operations, which is let's say grooming 10 dogs a day, we do not have that kind of need. The only thing we might do where we use water will be if we have to give a medicated bath to a cat that has a lot of fleas on it. So as such, the only use of water will be doing some medicated bathing for that purpose only. We don't do that in Durham, and we're not going to be doing it here. So as such, the only use of water is washing our hands, sterilization of equipment, and cleaning the facilities.
You won't have any dog walks or anything like that outside occasion?
Very good question. Since we are not offering any husbandry service, we don't have to worry about walking somebody's dog. And the patient that will be with us, for example, the building is 5,000 square feet. And if we have to keep a pet in the hospital, that pet is either coming for a regular surgical procedure like a spay or a neuter. So we want them to recover overnight there and not going home groggy and making the owner concerned. So as far as walking those pets are concerned, we don't want to walk them anyways.
But you have room for that if you needed it, outdoors.
Yeah, what we'll have to do is I think we'll have to take them upstairs.
That sounds great. I got diabetic cat.
Oh, I have not seen anybody walking their cats. I mean, I do have one client from Guilford. He brings his cat with, and the cat walks with them.
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Is there any area outside where, when your clients show up, they can relieve themselves before they come in? I mean, I know I've got 2 dogs, and I take them to the vet. They get out of the car, they want to do some business.
So if you look at this picture of the building, this is the front, and in front of the building there is the parking area. Between the ramp and the parking area, there is a grassy area with a fence, with a chain link fence. And I think that should be, that is like 8-9 feet wide. So that should be good enough for the dog to sniff around and, and stuff.
Anything else, sir? No. What's that? Mr. Secretary.
If this is not a public hearing, I would love to hear from the public about this, but let's just continue our night. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a change of use to veterinary facility for Sudesh Kumar, 1795 Boston Post Road, map 79, lot 36, as shown on an application dated January 28, 2015. This application is approved with the following single condition. 1, no outside work is approved. This application is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the zoning code.
Second.
Any other discussion? All set? Last chance. Sure.
Let's call the question.
Okay. All those in favor?
I just have one quick question. Outside work, does that mean treatment?
No, like building work, construction.
No outside alterations into the existing structure?
The only alteration we would like to do is to remove the Chesley sleep sign and put ours. That's the only thing we want to do.
I still vote yes. Yeah, I still vote yes too. Everybody still on board? Okay.
Call the question.
I did.
Oh, sorry.
We're all set. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good luck.
Thank you.
I'll bring my dog down there. George, stop in. Soon. Okay. Back to the public hearing. Are you okay, George? Okay. So, can I get a motion to open the public hearing for the Guilford Agricultural
So
Society?
moved, Mr. Chairman. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Where do we start? Chuck, that's right. Chuck's going to give us some good words.
Mr. Chairman, one of the issues that came up, there was some legal questions that were asked at the last public hearing. As you may recall, asked the question directed to me. I asked their 2 attorneys for Agricultural Society and attorneys for some of the neighbors, asked them to address the questions as well. The issues really concern what authority do you have to impose conditions on areas outside the particular buildings that are the particular subject of the application. In other words, can you look at the whole site? Can you impose conditions relating to the entire site, or are they limited to the buildings themselves? That was sort of the general question. They were phrased in different ways, but that was the issue. The responses from the attorneys, the general proposition is that the condition should be reasonably related to the application. So that's not a lot of precision there. And there was some further specifications from Attorney Cronin. Attorney Cronin's position was that, as not surprisingly, that that it would have to be strictly related to the buildings that are the subject, and if the condition related to that, it could be off-site, perhaps a screening or something like that as related to the building. But you shouldn't use this, or you can't use this to revisit the initial 1989 conditions that were imposed. Attorney Shansky's initial letter didn't really address the specific questions, generally in agreement with the general principle. I believe she had a supplemental letter today that she has submitted where has recommended certain conditions, but I don't see her as disagreeing with the general proposition that any conditions have to be reasonably related to the application. Her point is that the use for the building and the pavilion, in fact, covers the whole entire site, because if you use those things, you're going to be using the parking and the fields and the other things. So I'm sort of paraphrasing her, but she's saying that, well, that really allows you to look at the entire site, because the uses are sort of integrally related to the site. So that is where it is. Now, I had some further discussions about where we might go with each of the attorneys. that I can get into you later, but I know the public hearing is still open. We haven't heard from the public, and I'm not sure as to what kind of specific conditions you'd be looking at. And maybe you want to hear from the public and see what they recommend about that. But I can tell you what I was generally, sort of, it was going a little bit beyond, it's what I say, you can throw it out and say, forget it, whatever. But I was, in looking at the context of this application, it's an application to modify a condition from a 2013 permit. The application is not to actually change the original conditions at all. I think that was anticipated that when this was granted in 2013, I think the direction was, we're going to make this temporary because we want you to get together to see if you can work it out. But frankly, even the 2013 application wasn't to modify the original conditions, and it looks like they haven't been able to do that. The suggestion as to the other issue that came up sort of at the last public hearing was sort of two issues. One is that these original 1989 conditions are kind of vague. It's not clear what a nonprofit is. It's not clear what activities are actually covered by that. And I think there was a dialogue in the report, and the staff has had occasion to look at those, but not in the connection with, we're going to do this. It's sort of these ancillary mechanical or electrical or food service permits that come in kind of shortly before that typically, I think staff said, sort of generously, they signed off on them. They weren't really looking at the underlying use. But so that has gone on, and so that hasn't been looked at closely, and there's one occasion of the Renaissance Fair where that was looked at, and I think the commission, that came before the commission, came before staff, and that was found to be in violation of the conditions of the 1989 permit. So there is a sense that the condition itself is not wholly clear, but there's one occasion that it happened anyway, notwithstanding that, even though we said it was unclear. But there's a ton of good things that go on the site too. There are a lot of community civic activities or whatever. No one wants to stop that. So part of the issue that came up, and part of even I heard from the opposing neighbors, was not so much let's revisit, let's reformulate the original conditions, because they tried that and they weren't successful. And Tom Cronin got up and said, we don't want to do that. We got to live with the original conditions. We're just asking that you allow this permanently, approve us, deny us, but just, do that, but don't revisit the initial conditions. So I don't hear, I think some of the objecting neighbors will sure, they'll want to impose lots of additional things, but the focus, a lot of the focus was just wanting to know in advance what it is was proposed, so that you can determine, number one, is that actually in conformance with the, if they had come in with if he had known 6 months in advance the Renaissance Fair, he could have told them. I think that maybe is a bad example because they had contracts in place that had been allowed in prior years, so maybe there's that issue. But one of the issues is, I'm kind of looking this as, this is not the occasion for you guys to be revisiting the conditions of the 1989 permit in this application. Number one, they didn't request it. It's just a request to modify a condition, and a condition that allowed it for a temporary permit to allow it on a permanent basis. There may be an occasion where they can come in with a straight application to say, I think these conditions are too restrictive. Why have nonprofit, nonprofits and profits make the same noise? They can make that argument, but I think what is before you really is, and even when I'm hearing what the objections are, isn't so much you need to revisit the conditions, but frankly, you need to know whether a particular proposal is in conformance with the conditions, and so you can tell them, which would benefit the Ag Society and their customers, so they don't market the site and say, yeah, we're going to rent you this place, and have the poor people have a zoning enforcement order thrown on them. So presumably, if you know in advance and they know that this is permitted, they don't have to worry about that. And then the neighbors would know as well that, or at least this is allowed whatever. So that is how I'm frankly looking at this. And I went as far as to draft a resolution that kind of to that effect, that you would frankly call for a approval of the application. Again, this is all, you throw it out, I don't sit here, you guys do. Approval, subject to conditions that you get 6 months advance warrant, that they notify you 6 months in advance that, of the particular events, to give you, and that's what they have to do, and you have the opportunity to notify them if this is not in conformance.
And
And-
just so I clearly understand,
Right.
it's up to the commission to decide if it fits in with what we said in 1980.
Yeah, you guys, the commission imposed that condition. That came from the commission, obviously different members, but it came from the commission. I mean, there's stuff in the regulations, say doubts about the meaning of the terms of the word shall be decided by the commission. So I think it's the commission itself would be appropriate agent's body to determine, does this particular activity come within this? And you have a history, you can look at that, you can make, everyone can make the arguments why they do, why it doesn't, but ultimately it would be you guys to do that. I just think having that process would be helpful. And you don't want to make it too tight so that there isn't some, last minute thing that comes in. But on the other hand, you want to get it in advance to allow them to notify people, whatever. So that's kind of what I was thinking that would sort of resolve at least, and it pushes, it deliberately kicks down the road. Do you want to revise the conditions? Maybe they need to do that. But I didn't see this as the best application to do that.
And if something came up in an emergency, gotta have basis, we're meeting every 2 weeks anyway. So it's not like, you missed this go-around, you have to wait 2 weeks.
Right, yeah, I mean, hopefully there's, I said notify 6 months in advance, but if something comes up and there's some charitable event or something that they didn't do it, presumably there's some way they can still come in there and it's, request a waiver or something, I don't know.
So what else should we think about that?
Well, no, that was just me thinking about this. You got the public who may want to comment on this application and may say things that, why I'm misreading things. But that was just my effort to try to move things along.
Tom?
Could I go back to the original, because you said that this, you thought in some ways that the original approval in '89 was kind of vague?
Right.
Did you say that?
I did.
Okay. So this says that the use of this property be limited to agricultural fairs, craft shows, auto shows, and similar activities of a non-profit nature. What do you think is vague about that?
I was focusing more on the similar activities.
Okay.
Because that to me could mean a lot or little things. You're right, the nonprofit stuff isn't. But the similar activities, I don't know what that means. But you guys can figure that out.
And then it goes on and says that the musical events, including concerts, are expressly prohibited except as accessory to one of the above activities.
That's clear.
That's very clear.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now-
That's clear. But the similar activity, that's what I meant by that.
So, is there been any activity like that where there's been just plain concerts that are not part of?
Was there not a jazz festival or something?
But is it
3 days.
accessory to a nonprofit that, or would be listed above as nonprofit in nature activities?
So you're saying that if the primary function of an event is music, that in some way could be construed as an accessory
No.
to some other, or?
No, I think this is pretty clear that unless it's music that's associated with the fair or a craft show or auto shows, then it's not, then a concert is not allowed.
I agree with your interpretation.
Yeah, I think a concert as a principal use would be tough. If that's it. And so a jazz festival, I would see that as not being allowed. Right.
It would all come before us and we could hash out each one.
Right.
And say, all right, they're going to have, in this particular one that they're talking about now, it's sort of gray, and we take a vote, and, we do this all the time, kind of sort out touchy issues.
The other question I had that relates to this is the issue of authority. Because the town has an ordinance, they have a noise ordinance now that's enforced by the police department, because they can go out and they can measure, and it's clear how they have to do that and they can make a decision whether it's too loud or not. So what, does the Planning and Zoning Commission really have any, what's our role in that? Do we have any role at all?
With regard to the noise ordinance?
Yes.
No.
So we can't make any decision about this in relationship to what goes on the fairgrounds and the amount of noise it makes. It's really up to the police department to decide that.
Well, that narrow focus on the amount of noise, but the actual usage would fall under our purview.
Right.
Tom, you and Peter put a noise restriction on the Doe Market LLC when it came before us in terms of outside music.
Peter?
Peter Golitz. Back when he was here before he
I
ascended.
think there might
to
have
the-
been a time limit as to how long it could be on, how long
Yeah.
they could have music, but I don't know
And
if it
how
would.
late it could.
Right,
how
I
late
think
could
that's
be.
what it was. I
Okay.
think it was like 10 o'clock.
Well, let me clarify my answer to your question. Strictly speaking, the enforcement and administration of the noise ordinance is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen and the Police Department. That doesn't mean that you don't consider noise as part of your overall consideration of applications, like special permit applications, where noise might be part of the impact related to it. So you can certainly, in my opinion, consider noise as part of the special permit use or proposed special permit activity, notwithstanding the fact that the noise ordinance would be also effective and operable with regard to that activity. Typically what happens with events that, especially where there's going to be musical events, where the noise or the music is going to clearly exceed the decibel levels that are allowed under the noise ordinance, there is a provision allowing for the event organizer or sponsor to go before the Board of Selectmen and get an exemption from the operation of the noise ordinance for that particular event. So, and that typically happens with concerts and events like that, where they do grant such an exemption. And then the Board of Selectmen can impose conditions when they grant that exemption, such as the music has to be terminated at 10 o'clock or whatever it might be. So, but those two things do operate on separate channels of authority, as you suggest.
Counselor, let's get to the hard part. What happens if if we say that this is what we want, and what happens if that doesn't happen?
So you say something, say you adopt something like this, and they're supposed to come in and give it and they comply and say, we want to do this event, and you say that's a profit event, or it doesn't come with that, so that doesn't come within our 1988 permit, and they do it anyway. So then that's an enforcement question. And then what you can do for enforcement, there are about 5 different things you can do.
Like what?
You can issue the citation, the daily fines. We can go to court. We can get an injunction in court to prevent it before it happens, which is, that's another reason to do it in advance. There's a different set of fines over and above than the $150 a day thing. That if you go to court and do that, that costs money. Those are the main ones. You can. I doubt you'd get criminal enforcement for this stuff. You can get a prosecutor involved. You might, but because they can throw people in prison.
I don't think we want.
I don't see that happening.
I don't think we want.
I'm just going through the litany. What are the remedies for zoning violations?
Okay, so hypothetically, let's say they said, you know what, planning and zoning, we're going to do a jazz concert, and we think that fits, and so we go to court and get an injunction, and they do it anyway.
I would be just very surprised if that happened. But one reason that it's good to know this in advance, if they know it and you say no and they do it anyway, that is just asking for a slap in the face by a judge. That makes my job so much easier to get an injunction. And they don't take an appeal or whatever. They don't take some other remedy. I think that's going to really annoy the court if we have this process in place and do that. And that's why I don't think they'll do it.
Okay, and
I don't think that would ever happen. But
I agree, but I'd rather
say they
get all
sold
the-
it to some other the Madison Agricultural Society. You can't say
Right. They would do that.
Yeah, they would, not Guilford.
Well, I would rather get all that out now and talk about it now, so, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, before you get into debating the merits of this particular suggestion or concept, maybe we could sort of get the public, conclude the public hearing. I know there are lots of people who want to speak both on this particular subject and also on the broader subject. So, and I'm sure Mr. Cronin and Ms. Jansky want to address
Well, I'm sure too.
further.
Well, what would we like to do, George? Would we like to invite the Mr. Cronin to speak first, and then Ms. Shansky?
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, let's set Mr. Cronin first, because I'm sure he's got...
For the record, Attorney Tom Cronin, I for once have nothing to say. I said what I said last month. I think Attorney Andrus has encapsulated this evening perfectly what I've tried to put in front of you, a lot less artfully. At the risk of doing some housekeeping, last month, I think the commission departed a bit from its norm of hearing from the applicant, asking for people in favor, out of respect for Attorney Shansky, you may have gone directly there. I think that it might benefit the commission to hear the rest of the people opposed, hear from the people who are not opposed, and then I can comment at the end. But rather than respond to anything right, I have nothing to add right now. If I rebut, it's more efficient.
That would be great. I'm just reading over what we always say at the beginning of the meeting to make sure we follow that order.
We have letters in here after testimony.
We do have letters. In fact,
They might be here that.
When they both have lawyers, sometimes we do them first and then the public, but you could also go to the in favor at this time.
Want to do the letters first?
we have an awful lot of letters. Plus, Nancy Elderbaum also presented me with some letters for everybody, which we want to make sure we add.
There might be, the individuals who wrote the letters might be here, to comment themselves, rather than hear us read them.
We could do that, right?
What?
We don't have to read all the letters and
you don't
acknowledge that we received them.
Right, yeah, I think the public should know if they've written a letter that, George, did everyone get, did you send them to every commissioner?
Everybody has received by email a complete
Like 30
record of what we
pages.
had
Yes.
as of that time. There's been a couple of things come in since then, I know. As you just alluded to, you do have a complete record of all the documents you received.
So we don't necessarily have to read all the letters.
Should we just say, acknowledge the letter and say that this person was in favor or not,
I don't know, what do you think?
like individuals?
We could start off with the in favors, and they can refer to their letters, and then the people who are not here, we could also make a reference to
Okay.
those.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we have folks who want to speak in favor of the application? And there might be a couple of you there. Would any of you like to come and speak with us? No?
There's,
Want to speak in favor of this? Come on down.
My name is Barbara Hammerlin. I live at 130 Crooked Hill Road in North Guilford. And I am a member of the Guilford Agricultural Society. I do have some letters here that I do not believe are in your file. One I'd really like to read, and it's from Charles Hershaft, the fire marshal. To whom it may concern, over the past 10 years, through the cooperation of your society, the Guilford Building Officials Office, and the Guilford Fire Marshal's Office, we have made numerous strides in improving public safety at the Guilford Fairgrounds. Through systematic physical improvements made to the site-wide electrical distribution system, improvement to complex lighting, and installation of modern compliant stadium seating, you have made your fair site one of the safest and code-compliant outdoor public event sites in the state of Connecticut. Now, with your efforts to eliminate the use of temporary structures such as tents through the installation of compliant structures and pavilions, You are further demonstrating your concern and commitment for safety of the attendees and groups who use your facilities. We thank you for your past efforts and fully encourage your continued installation of future permanent structures in hopes to completely eliminating the use of tents which do not offer the same level of safety or safety features that permanent structures provide. Signed by Charles Rorschach. I have a letter here from Social Services who are in support of the Ag Society and what they do. The Guilford Agricultural Society has always been very supportive of the programs offered by my department, Guilford Social Services, especially our food bank. The Agricultural Society has been steadfast contributors through the many years I've been associated with Guilford, offering assistance during our holiday food programs with monetary and food donations long before we even established the Guilford Food Bank. I have found the Agricultural Society to be generous supporters to our Guilford community in very quiet and low-key ways, not only actively donating food and finances to our programs, but encouraging their members and those they are connected with through the fairgrounds to remember that not everyone in Guilford has the monetary means to attend and support events. These kind of actions have resulted in in-kind donations of complimentary entrance fees to Guilford residents who would otherwise not be able to attend events, and generous donations of food from supporters who we would otherwise not have at the Guilford Food Bank. In fact, one of the off-season events at the fairgrounds over the past few years has been instrumental in providing the community an outlet to generously support our cause, which results in many tons of food being donated annually to the Guilford Food Bank at the time when our shelves are low. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to increase your awareness of the Guilford Agricultural Society's meaning presence in the Guilford community. Tammy D. Francesco. And then the last one I have is from the Guilford Keeping Society. Dear Mr. Meyer, as board chair of the Guilford Keeping Society and writing in support of the Guilford Agricultural Society's application for a special permit for their barns, the Ag Society has benefited the Keeping Society in many ways throughout the years. They have stored a Guilford ox cart for us, which the Guilford Keeping Society did not have storage space for. They support the Guilford Keeping Society car parking at the Griswold House during the Guilford Fair and cut our field for free prior to this year's fair. They also let the Guilford Keeping Society use the field for overflow parking. We consider them a good neighbor. Signed, Winnie Seifert. I'd like to enter these into the record, and I just want to also voice my support for the approval of the buildings. And I believe that they are important for the safety and well-being of the community.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Can you pass this down? Who else would like to speak in favor? Come on down.
Good evening, everybody. Peter Palumbo, 120 Lovers Lane. So I live right across from the fairgrounds, and since these buildings have been erected, to me, I think I was in favor of them when they first were put up. I'm sorry for the mishap between everybody in this room with them, but they fit right in the landscape. I love them. I think they look fine. I definitely think there was a positive use for them. Storage, inside storage, safety of equipment and materials that they have there that they use all year round. So I hope that this board can help resolve this issue.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Thank you. We're going to stay here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Bowen. I live at 184 Stonehouse Lane. I've been a resident in Guilford my entire life. I'm next door to where I currently live on Stonehouse Lane. So the fair has always been part of the fabric of Guilford and what we believe in and what we do. I'm definitely in favor of the buildings. I think they've enhanced the property greatly, as Peter had just mentioned, and they remind that they provide necessary inside storage, certainly don't have to shell out money for tents every year, and I'm certainly in favor of that. And it's certainly an improvement to the property, in the neighborhood, and I love being there. And I love seeing that as opposed to what could be there, 53 homes per Mrs. Hunter, who used to be my neighbor. So, thank you for...
Thank you very much. Who else? Come on up, sir, please.
My name is Craig Helmers, 35 Boston Street. I'd like to urge the commission to approve the uses of the buildings there. I've been a volunteer at the fair for many years, and I've also never missed the Lobster Fest volunteering for them. They make a lot of money. They give it all back to this town, and the town benefits a lot by the uses of the money. And I also run a cross-country meet there once in a while in the fairgrounds, and I think it's a good use. And I urge you to approve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Who else? Okay.
I'm Martha Lombard. I live at 33 Lovers Lane, which is adjacent to the fairgrounds. And I like what they've done. I'm a member of the Agricultural Society. I am all for continued building of permanent structures, and the fair is a good neighbor.
Is that it? Thank you, ma'am. Who else? Come on down.
Hi, I'm Ed Lombard. I'm also at 33 Lovers Lane, and I just want to add to what my mother said. We actually share 835 feet of boundary along the northern edge. The buildings have actually cleaned up the fairgrounds by having the indoor storage. There's not this clutter. Some of the machinery they use for mowing and stuff, it's put away now. And they've always been great neighbors. I've been there all but a year and a half of my 39 years in Guilford. And they're such good neighbors. When my father passed away, we actually, in lieu of flowers, donations went to the Agricultural Society. So I'm speaking in support of it.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Lombard, I missed your first name, I'm sorry.
Ed.
Ed, thank you.
I'm Todd Raskin of 35 Lovers Lane. My property also borders the fairgrounds. My wife didn't even realize there was new structures on it. It looks good. I'd rather see that in tents, and just that I'm in support of it.
Thank you very much. Come on down.
This is not an ADA compliant arrangement.
My name is Dixon Anderson. We live at 18 Paddock Lane, across the street from the fairgrounds. I am a member of the Agricultural Society, lifelong resident of Guilford, first summer person, now year-round. And I am totally in favor of these buildings. They're safer for people with disabilities to have a solid building as opposed to the lines of a tent. And I think it's an improvement to the property.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Appreciate that. Anybody else want to speak in favor? Brian? I have a sense that you might want to say something.
Brian McClellan, 622 Albrecht Point Road. I'm glad to hear that the discussions are focusing on the barn and the pavilion and not getting hung up with all the extraneous uses and the potential uses or possible uses. It's just the barn and the pavilion we're looking at the moment, and that's what the application's focused on. So I hope we can stay focused there and address the other issues maybe at another time. But I do support them, the investments, the continuing investments in the fairgrounds, all the things that have been highlighted, whether it's parking, lighting, safety, bathroom, all those kinds of things are improving the site and making it more desirable when it's used for all the occasions that it's used. Just a side note, my daughter was married at the end of September. over at Rollwood Park, and before she left, went over to the fairgrounds and had pictures taken there because that was part of her childhood memory, and wanted shots out in front. Or to the new barns, but still had pictures there. So I certainly endorse and support this application as it's presented.
Thank you, Brian. Stephen, you want to?
No, he said it all.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Sir?
My name is Joe Farrell. I live at 166 Lovers Lane. I've lived there for 14 years now, actually. I see those buildings every day. I think they're absolutely fantastic. I want to support the application of the Guilford Agricultural Society 100% in this. They've done a fantastic job in keeping this space open. What's good for the Agricultural Society is good at keeping this space open and is good for Guilford. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Patty Bowen. I live at 184 Stonehouse Lane. And I drive by the fairgrounds probably 30 times a day and look at it every day and see all these beautiful buildings that are put there. Not only the two that we just built, but all the buildings that we maintain and the whole property that we keep up year-round. And I am in support of all that they do there.
Thank you very much.
Your name's spelled B-O-N-A-N?
B-O-H-A-N.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Who else would like to talk in favor? MJ? No? Yeah, okay, come on down. You had that look like you needed to say something.
Mary Jo Kestner. I live at 131 Boston Street. I get to hear the music that plays whenever there's an event at the fairground, and I enjoy that. I think I am in support of the application for the buildings. I wish it wasn't after the fact. I think that doing things beforehand through the right channels is helpful, and I'm sure that we're going to continue that way in the future. So they are a great neighbor, and I do support that application.
Great, thank you. Who else? Anyone else? Last chance. Okay. All right, so.
Shansky first.
Yeah, I think so. Ms. Shensky, would you like to talk?
I would like to get the same brilliant invitation that you've just accorded the rest of the hall.
Well, we love that you're here. We would love to hear what you have to say.
That's more like it. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Attorney Marjorie Shansky. I am here to talk, to refocus the conversation, if you will. Buildings per se, it's delightful that there's inside storage. I appreciate that that can enhance the view of the fairgrounds in a large part of the year and eradicate the sort of looking at equipment. That's great. But we are here to talk about the use. And we are here to talk about the use of an open-sided building, which when incorporated into the greater fairground use, implicates more than just the structure. And I don't mean in a broad way, and I'm not trying to divert the conversation to the narrow pavilion. But if you use that as the stage or the place where you put the performer, and then use the entire field for the audience, you're talking about something that's way more expansive than just, we're going to do something in the building. We've had the letter from the, let me state for the record, everybody's in favor of public safety. Everybody's in favor of that. But we've just heard a letter from the fire marshal congratulating the Ag Society on its structures and its enhancements to public safety and talking about the installation of future permanent structures. And we had another person who testified about an intention to add additional permanent structures. And I'm reminded, although it deals with the issue of nonconformity more than the issue of special permits, of the baby elephant. We had an application in 1980 and that, you know, the baby elephant grows up. Were we prepared when we said you could have a baby elephant for the mature elephant? And I'm not saying that this is expanded, the fairgrounds are the fairgrounds, but there does appear to be, we seem to be in a prospective transition, let's call it that. But for the moment, we're looking at approving the use of the pavilion. And I'm suggesting to you that the conditions that might be associated with that are indeed what council has suggested, having prior notice of what's intended. And you know, as I thought about this, you know how that way of opening a Chinese fortune cookie and you add the phrase "in bed" at the end of anything you read there? Well, I'm going to offer you a set of conditions, and you can just add the prepositional phrase "in the pavilion," or "when the pavilion is used." Doesn't have to be more expansive than that. But Commissioner Cost, the issue of noise doesn't get to the noise ordinance until you as a commission under a special permit have allowed the noise to occur. So you are very much squarely, as the town planner said, you are squarely the determinant of whether or not the noise occurs. And we would submit to you that if the pavilion were going to be used as a performance venue, that it be limited as to frequency, limited as to duration. And duration, frequency, and there's one other parameter, and it's in my letter, which let me give that to you now. The original goes to...
Probably the safest thing is to give it to staff, because we'll lose it.
This is a new letter. And on page 3 of the new letter are some recommended conditions. And council has seen them, and they are directed specifically at the pavilion, including a vegetative buffer, which would be a nice evergreen buffer to shield the use of the pavilion from the immediate neighborhood. Noise is a very important issue, so the use of the pavilion as a performance space is critical to us. Enforcement is the other item that's critical to us, but you know, your council is sort of the Connecticut Bar Association's expert on enforcement, so we're entirely comfortable with that in the mechanics.
And yet he was so reticent about describing enforcement. Perhaps because he is the expert.
He has a full toolbox at his disposal. And that is really, if you will please kindly look at these conditions, and you know, you may read the rest of the letter, although some of it is recap of where we've been. I don't think there's vast disagreement on the scope of this, but there is an immediacy and a legitimate concern that the use of the pavilion has the potential to exponentially increase the negative externalities, the noise associated with the use of the fairgrounds. And on that basis alone, we offer you, for your consideration, these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
May I ask a question of the board?
Not yet, right? Hold until after the...
Yep, we will get to you, I promise you. We'll get to you, I promise we'll get to you, and you'll be able to ask. Okay, so, are you all set? You're all set. So would anyone like to speak against the applicant? Come on down.
I'm Pete Perugini. I live at 200 Whitfield Street, which is adjacent to the fairgrounds. I've addressed the commission a number of times. Thank you again for your time. I guess listening to what everybody said, I pretty much feel exactly the same way. As you know, I think the Guilford Fair is a wonderful event. I think the Ag Society supports many great charities in town. I think there's great events that happen in the fairgrounds and should continue to happen. I think it's a great resource to have the open space. I believe in improving public safety. I think the barns are attractive. I've never had a problem with the way the barns have looked. Would have liked to have some discussion about placement so that it wasn't along the property line, but my concern has always been intensity of use and whether this was going to increase it, and that was the original questions that I had when this came up. Right now, the town's attorney has offered, an option for you guys to consider that would make myself as one of the neighbors more comfortable that someone, whether it be the zoning enforcement officers or the board, looking at what goes on there, similar activities and the stuff that's happened over there, I'd say there's a lot of stuff that's wonderful that goes on there. I think majority of the stuff that goes on there is wonderful. But what else could happen over there? Could you have, the Guilford Fair is great for 3 days, but I'm glad it's 3 days a year. If it was, 10 or 12 days a year, and you throw a Renaissance Festival in there, which was clearly outside, but that's something separate, but you throw in something like an Oktoberfest that was a fair with beer. And I had fun. I enjoyed it. So I'm probably the worst one to come up here and say it, but if I had to live next to something like that for 5 or 6 weekends, and there's no restraints in this. The only restraints are that it has to fit one of these 3 criteria or a similar activity. And from my side, I would love for some clarity on what's a similar activity, not only for us, but also for the Ag Society, so that they know what's within their purview. What can and can't they use it for that's acceptable? And that's all we've been asking for from the beginning. Sorry that this has taken so much time for everybody.
Oh, no,
but
we live for this. This is what
Yeah.
we love this. So we enjoy
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak against it? Anybody else?
Or perhaps more accurately, in favor of conditions, it would seem.
Yeah, that's true. That seems to be where it's heading. Anyone else? Sir?
I can just offer my presence here in the meeting as being interested as well. I live
Name and address.
Derek Streeter, 196 Whitfield, just across, there's a couple of properties between us. Nothing new, so I'm not going to waste any time here. But I think the points that were made by Pete and the attorney are very appropriate. The building itself is a conduit for a lot of these activities. The land is for the storage facility. I also love the Guilford Fair. Wasn't here for the some of the other events, but I'm sure I'll attend in the future. But I think that it's an oversimplification to review this application, especially given that it's an hindsight after the fact application that gives the board a little more latitude to consider the actual practical use of the building not only today but in the future. And as Pete said, it's not the current use or the recent use of the buildings, the fairgrounds as a concern. It's just the limitless possibilities of the future. It's actually been reinforced by their general approach to these conversations we tried to have in the last year or so. That's it.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jackie Mack, I spoke last time. We agree that the barns are beautiful, that the new barn, the storage barn is great, the look is great, the way they were built was, by the Amish people who came up for the weekend was very appropriate. But what we're here for is just as neighbors, we want to emphasize that when you interpret the 1989 permit, and we are very happy if Reggie and George get involved, we think that would help the issue tremendously, just so that one of the factors that is considered as a special permit use is what kind of nuisance value it presents to the neighborhood. And I think if that's taken into consideration when you're trying to determine what is similar and what in the interpretation of the permit, it would be very helpful, because if, for instance, you had the Oktoberfest every weekend, or something loud, if you had a craft festival like is on the Guilford Green, that's great, that's perfect, that's a perfect use. So I just would hope that when you go to interpret this, that you take into consideration that it can be win-win. It can be a great event for the Ag Society and a great event for the neighborhood. And that's what we hope we can get, that kind of measure and compromise. So.
Good. What kind of limitations would provide that?
For instance, the way, just as an example, and I mentioned this I think the last time, when the town has a same issue and confronts the selectmen with the use of the town green. And the use of the town green, you have plays, you have lots of different events, but the majority of the events are not amplified and are not loud, so that people can come, enjoy themselves, and leave. And the neighbors surrounding are not bothered. Now, there are 5 events where anyone downtown can hear the music. There are the concerts that take place in the summer, maybe 5 times. But they're limited. They're limited to 5 or 6, I'm not quite sure of the number, and they're limited in number of hours, 2 hours. So it's not an all-day event. When you have music in a neighborhood or loud noise, even if it's an accessory event to something else, but if it goes on for 12 hours and it can go on several weekends in a row, that is very onerous on the neighborhood. So that we would like not to be considered a similar activity. So it's all just a question of balancing and taking the different interests into account. And also when the Dudley Farm, I mean, and I think you do this, you're experts at this, with the Dudley Farm, when the barn was put up and it was allowed to have social structures in the barn, there's a specific condition which you imposed that said music is allowed only within the enclosed barn. And having, for instance, we were not able to speak on the open air pavilion because it went up before, but to the extent that they want a place, a venue for music, we would like them to put up something with structure, with size, so that the music does not filter across to, you might like the music, you might not, but the important part that the Guilford selectmen put into the regulations for the town green, which is also in our regulations for special permits, is that music and announcements should not be heard on abutting property. And I think Walter mentioned yesterday, or last time we were here, that he is very sensitive to the nuisance. And all we're saying is be sensitive to the issue of nuisance. And with Reggie and George, and if you look at the events and say, okay, it's a great event, but it's a little too noisy for the small downtown area, and we actually have suggestions. We're not saying no loud events, but in the letter that Marjorie provided, it says that large events with over 2,500 anticipated attendees shall be limited to 5 events per year, in addition to the annual fair, and must be posted on the Ag Society's website 2 months in advance. That gives neighbors an opportunity to know, okay, we're not going to plan our wedding, we're not going to do, we know that there's going to be some loud event there, or some large event, just a notice requirement. And then it also says, and then with respect to noise, events with amplified microphones, announcers, or any music, amplified or otherwise, shall be limited to 5 per year. There shall be no use of 5 per year. Music or amplification limited to 2 hours per day, and no amusement rides other than the fair. Amusement rides are very, very onerous on a neighborhood, and because people ride on them and scream and shout. So anyway, we have tried to provide some guidelines that we think might be helpful. But, thank you.
Have there been other events that have had rides?
The Oktoberfest.
They had rides.
Yes.
Okay.
Barbara? All right, I guess maybe I should address this to Attorney Cronin. I guess she just mentioned several specific things, which were a limitation on the number of events per year by type, the fair plus 5 events that are over 500 attendees.
2,500.
Over 2,500 attendees, correct? And then 5 other additional events, and then she mentioned music of 2 hours a day and no amusement rides other than the fair. Some of those seem like your client would not, or would want to adjust the number slightly, or would not particularly object. But I'm not sure, obviously. I was wondering if there are parameters that you've discussed pertaining to that.
We actually started discussing parameters a year ago, and those discussions went nowhere.
Well, the discussions with the other party went nowhere, but obviously you also have an opinion about the number of events that the Ag Society would like to have on that property. Say 100 days of Oktoberfest per year would be the outer limit.
Well,
or I mean, you know, like rolling back from insanity down to choking out the Ag Society so that it makes no money and disappears and can no longer do the wonderful things it does for us. There is a whole range of certain values that you...
Certainly. But I'm not here this evening to negotiate numbers of days on any kinds of events. Your counsel was very clear. If I'm saying something different than him today, than he said earlier, the application tonight is to remove the exploration, if you will, on the pavilion. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about Oktoberfests and Jazz Fests and everything else. Let me try to simplify the application for you. No more road races, because they're not craft fairs, art shows, or fairs.
That's already in the 1989 permit.
That's
so
correct.
that's not something that's being offered so much tonight as a fact that we all already live with.
Well, what I'm trying to do is you're hearing conditions on events that don't fall within the ambit of the 1989 permit. I'm trying to bring in front of you what the true question is. The Oktoberfest and how many events we have like the Oktoberfest. If you approve what I'm asking you to do tonight, you'll have no more applications for Oktoberfests than you would have had if you don't approve it. Oktoberfests are not permitted under the letter of 1989. The fireworks aren't permitted under the 1989 permit. Mustering emergency vehicles at the time of a hurricane is not permitted. Now, maybe the town can, do a mini eminent domain or something, road races and so on. What I put in front of you in an effort to simplify this, because I have an immediate need. I have a building that's up that I cannot use. I've either got to be able to use it, or I'm going to tell my client to take it down. If they take it down, then we're back to 1989. I agree with Chuck that the language is vague. I agree with him. I would recommend that the Ag Society, in cooperation with the town, in cooperation with the neighbors, work towards modifying those conditions. That was what I think Mr. Bauer was trying to accomplish a year or so ago. That just didn't work. And meanwhile, the elephant in the living room is a barn that's up that can't be used. Everybody, or my client's entitled to a decision on can you use the barn or must it come down? So there are conditions that relate to the barn, right? If, for example, you said that the barn had to be enclosed in order to have permanent approval, I might not like that, but I think that that's an acceptable condition, at least from a legal point of view. It relates to what we're talking about. But we won't allow you to keep the barn unless you agree that you won't have more than 5 events a year. I don't think that that's going to be upheld by the court. That's my opinion. You have counsel here.
What about we won't allow you to keep the barn unless you have no more than 30 days worth of events per year?
I personally think you might have a tough time with that. I'll give you a CO for your house, but you can only live there for 30 days.
Is this a residential structure that we're talking about?
No. I'll give you a CO for your electrical supply store, but you can only use it for 30 days.
Is this a commercial establishment?
I'm trying to point out to you...
The fairgrounds historically were used for the fair. Now they're used for additional things. This barn provides an opportunity for even more events to occur on this site because it provides the infrastructure necessary for both larger scale events as well as more certainty that an event can take place because it protects from the weather.
Are you talking about events that are permitted under the 1989?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, you're right. I agree with you.
So if that's true, then we could put limits on it.
So the barn has shown up, right? I mean, the Ag Society, the board of the Ag Society probably has about, between them probably has about 500 years of residency in Guilford, right? About 5 centuries worth of time that they've spent in Guilford between all of them. And this barn went up one day. Now, the question becomes, your position is that this board is essentially in a game of chicken, where we either have to tear down the barn that a team of Amish construction gurus came up one weekend to put up, or we have to let it be. And there's no meaningful condition whatsoever that you are willing to contemplate for these barns.
I'll let you testify, Mr. Corbier, but I won't let you testify as to what I said, okay?
Well, you have testified to what Chuck said. Well, I didn't hear him say exactly what you said.
What I
just now.
said, and let me be clear.
Yes.
What I said was that if you imposed a condition that required the building to be walled in, I think that's a legitimate condition.
You also think it's a legitimate condition to have the number of days possibly limited for the barn itself?
I did not say that.
You were perhaps on your opinion for the...
Well, that's a perhaps, and I think if you look through the rest of it, I believe what it said is my client might not choose to exercise any appeal rights. I think that's what I said. I can go look.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's number 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think it was number 1 for sure. The last paragraph of number 1 says, in addition, it seems likely that the Ag Society would probably not contest the imposition of such a condition if the number of days permitted allowed it to continue its historic use of the site as permitted under the existing special permit. I think that language speaks for itself. I didn't say that it's not, that it's absolutely legally permissible. I'm saying that I probably would advise my client not to contest that. So in that sense, we probably agree.
Because it would be otherwise referred back to this commission about whether or not to leave it or tear it down at that point? Or?
Pardon me?
Because at that point it would be referred back to this commission about whether or not to leave it or tear it down since no conditions are possible?
I'm lost as to how you get to the no conditions are possible. I don't recall testifying to that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Attorney Cronin, I had a quick question. Our council did discuss sort of a procedure for applications. Is that something that your client would be acceptable for your client as a condition?
I think that makes reasonable sense. What has happened if I can just amplify on that, what's happened in the past is, and it might be perceived differently by different people, and frankly, they may have more history than this, okay? I don't have a long history with the Ag Society. I happened to be here the night that they came with their first application that led to the go have the conversation and come back with a temporary approval, but I wasn't here on their behalf that night. I think, knowing how towns work, I think what happened was events came along that were technically, clearly, outside the scope of the 1989 permit. But they were thought of as good, positive community events
and people intending no harm said, sure. And then I think what probably happened was the Ag Society kind of said, okay, well, we can do that. And little by little, it crept out. I accept that that's what happened. And maybe that was deliberate on someone's part, maybe it wasn't, but I think that's how we got to where we are. What I've tried to do in this application is, for the pavilion, just for the pavilion, I want to take the pavilion back to the very strict parameters of 1989. I think that advances what you guys are trying to do. And I think, frankly, there ought to be another application made. It might be made by another attorney, because I might be fired before I finish this paragraph. But
You said that the other day, they didn't fire you. You're doing a great job.
well, you don't know whether I'm getting paid or not. So, it seems to me that everybody would benefit by a rewrite of what those conditions are. But it also seems to me that that rewrite is going to require a horse trade. And the Ag Society is going to have to give up something in order to get something. I think Chuck kind of used it as a throwaway, but when you think about the issues that bothered neighbors, things like hours of operation and amount of noise and so on, I can think of no discriminating characteristic of for-profit versus not-for-profit events that's louder or quieter or more self-righteous or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know why that went in 1989. I presume it had good reason, but right now you sit there and say, what's up with that? Noisy not-for-profit might not be as acceptable as really quiet for-profit. That negotiation can be had, but in my opinion, when you start negotiating in a situation where a party with rights, and the Ag Society has whatever rights 1989 gave them, vague as they may be, but there are certainly some rights. When they're going to start to have to give them up, they need to be a willing participant in that discussion. That's my opinion. I don't think that a zoning commission can take away those rights.
And one follow-up question, do you have any procedural recommendations for an application by the Ag Society? Should it go just to the zoning enforcement officer? Should it be something where we have before the planning and zoning committee?
To be honest with you, I don't. Chuck and I had a conversation about this earlier today. I had other things on my calendar today, and I didn't have, and it's not his fault, but I just haven't had a chance to get to the point where procedure or methodology has been written out.
Thank you.
So you're still saying that the addition of these two buildings does not represent an expansion of the 1989 permit?
Well, first of all, one of the buildings is already approved.
Correct.
Permanently approved.
Correct. So that
expanded or didn't expand all by itself?
But this commission already essentially expanded the 1989 permit in the case of one of the buildings last year. And what's on the table tonight is for us to expand it even further with an additional building now. The special permit certainly contemplated the structures that were already present in 1989.
Well, it must have contemplated the structures that were present and the tents that actually were used.
Correct. And now we have a couple new structures, only one of which is on the table tonight.
It would seem to me that the useful discrimination would be, is a permanent building going to expand the use more than a tent? And maybe the answer to that is yes. And by the way, I don't...
You know, people talking about how it's ADA compliant now and a whole bunch of other safety upgrades that provide for higher volume in practice.
I would think that's something you guys would look at positively, but that's my feeling.
Yes, but it's also an expansion.
Well,
but can I just ask you, how do you see that as an expansion of the permit that was granted though? Because the permit deals with the kinds of events that are on the property. It doesn't say anything about square footage or anything else. And basically, what I'm understanding is that these buildings are replacing tents that are taken out, put up and taken down every year. But that to me, I don't see that as an expansion. I mean, it's like the Durham Fair. I mean, they put all their buildings now where instead of tents are basically big buildings like this, and they're much more comfortable, and they make the fair better.
So supposing it isn't just these two, supposing it's 25 like this. Would that be an expansion? Having 25 buildings that could be used, it doesn't change the 1989 permit the way it applies, but it increases the use.
So Tom, I know this is discussion, and I'll just add, I think and I don't mean to put words in Walter's mouth, but what I think Walter's getting at for the expansion of use is actually that, if there's a rainy day when there otherwise wouldn't have been able to have this
Or
event.
a cold day.
Or cold day, well, I don't know if it's enclosed, but for purposes of this, a rainy day, and you otherwise wouldn't be able to have an event, and this is an organization that couldn't afford a tent, or wasn't able to get a tent to the site, so now you have an event that otherwise wouldn't have happened but for the structure. So, I mean, how you look at the expansion.
And may therefore also not have been booked.
Sure.
But for this structure.
So, I mean, the expansion is
Some people
straight.
don't like tents.
I don't think necessarily that the expansion of use affects the actual use of the site, but I do think that there is an expansion of use. And I don't know how to understand that, and I think that's where we have counsel.
It's worth every dollar. What do you think, Tom?
No, I just wanted to hear what the explanation
Should
is.
have a response, right? Does Ms. Shansky want to?
Ms. Shansky, would you please?
Sorry. I think that a condition that relates specifically to the frequency and duration and nature of activity in the pavilion is wholly before this commission and accessible to you. This is a special permit. It's all about how the integration of that element works under your criteria. And we have experience understanding what the impacts are from the events that have been held at the fairground over time, and to use this pavilion in accordance with the 1989 permit adds a new element, a new dimension, a new way to exercise that permit, and it's subject to conditions, like all special permits.
I have a quick
Reasonable
question.
conditions, yes.
The condition that's been thrown around by our council has been this basically application process by the Ag Society. And we heard testimony today from your clients that they are, in favor of a lot of the events that go on at that site. And they really just want further oversight of what's going on there. And is this sort of a reasonable compromise to have all the applications be filtered through either this, or it clearly gives people a very difficult time with a lot of stuff, or our zoning enforcement officer who is very capable? I mean, is that a reasonable solution to this, or are you still asking for more?
That is a reasonable one of 2, possibly 3 conditions. The second being a vegetative buffer, and the third being duration, time. But yes.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? Just on the vegetative buffer, have you checked with the rest of the neighborhood, or as Mr. Cronin, is that okay? I mean, do you know where on the can you show on the map where you're talking about? Or?
Yes.
And Mr. Cronin, have you looked at that or considered
I haven't
that?
seen what they're proposing as a vegetative buffer.
Do you want to flesh that out a little more?
I can't.
It says between the fairground and the Whitfield Street neighbors.
So how long is that?
What we were, I brought a picture last time, because there's behind Pete, my house, and some of the other Whitfield Street, 188, the streeters, there used to be quite a thick group of trees that was healthy, but now after the hurricane, a lot of the trees are down. There are old willows that are falling down. There's also this vine that has taken over in the wetlands and is killing the trees. And so when the hurricane comes, so now there's, in some areas, there's maybe 2 or 3 trees. So it would be from behind the bathroom of the fairgrounds, which is basically right by the pavilion, over to basically where the state State Museum begins. And it's very obvious where you can, because if you are over on Lover's Lane, you can look right through over to Pete's house.
Council?
Mr. Chairman, my clients have just informed me that there were trees there and that they were cut down by Ms. Mack. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've just been told.
On her property?
No, there were trees that fell down by the storm, and some were just hanging, and they came down.
I can't testify to firsthand knowledge, but there were trees there at one point in
Right, so
time.
she's saying that they came down in the storm, that's her testimony.
And the vines,
Perhaps
Does your
some of the
client
Ag
want it back?
Well, let me, perhaps some of the Ag Society members who have longer-term history would know.
I do know for a fact that I do know for a fact that there had been quite a tree buffer in the back there. Okay? I've lived here all my life. I've been on those grounds all my life and been in that area all my life. So I know what was there. Okay? I do know that there was some removal of some trees that took place when your house was being built, because I checked on permits that you had for the wetlands area, that you had some clearing done, okay? Which I had photographed. If you look on the GIS system on the town's website, you can look at the maps of the aerial views or the bird's eye views going back X amount of years, and you can see the actual vegetative state that is along the property line. And my other point is, just because a storm took trees down, why is it the Ag Society's issue to plant trees? If the trees were in the neighbors' yards and they fell in their yards and they want more trees, then they should be planting trees. We shouldn't have to be taking the burden of planting trees that didn't fall down on our property and didn't eliminate the buffer. We have not taken trees down along the buffer. We know that it's a buffer. And unfortunately, I think if people, and especially scientific people, understand, sound travels different times of the year in different ways. A lot of it's weather dependent. It's how something is situated, which direction speakers are facing. There's a lot of different scenarios of how sound travels, okay? I can be down the fairgrounds working, and I can hear the concert on the green clear as a bell as if it was on the fairgrounds. I can hear the railroad station, the announcements from when the trains are coming and that, clear as a bell while I'm on the fairgrounds, okay? Those are noises that you're in an area. What has been going on in those fairgrounds has been going on for many, many years. People have lived there. And until the building went up, there was never an issue. Okay? Those buildings are replacing tents that we have to pay out every year to rent. We are trying to improve the property, the look of the property, instead of having all these tents just floating all over the place. Have some of the organizations that have been there, the nonprofit organizations, have they wanted to utilize the building, especially the Lobster Fest? Yes. Why? Because they don't have to rent a tent. It's saving them money.
So you think that it's important that the Ag Society be able to continue to use the property at the level that it has historically used it, or the level that it used it in the 2000s, or the level that it's using it at currently, or at some higher level for the future?
I'm not looking at a higher level, honestly, right now, and I'm going to tell you why. We're all volunteers of that society. We only have so many people
that can help maintain the grounds down there. And everyone that does it is a volunteer. We all have families, we all have jobs. I mean, how much more can you ask volunteers to take on for maintaining? To mow and trim and everything takes hours and hours. It's not just a day, it's days, okay? And when you're trying to get a site ready for events, that takes a long time. And what if you have rain? What if you have this? You're cut short. And that's what, honestly, I wish my guys were here that do the maintenance down there, because they would tell you, we can't take on anymore right now. We can't.
Well, if you hired more guys and had more equipment.
We don't hire.
Well, all right, so if you had more volunteers and had more equipment, then you could do that at a higher level.
No. Absolutely not.
It'd be a lot of volunteers.
Right. But it's a
Absolutely
possibility.
So last year you used the fairgrounds in total for 3.5 weeks of the year.
I would probably say you're correct.
Like
I mean, over the span.
25 days across the whole year.
That's correct. I mean, for the majority of the year, the neighbors get to enjoy open space. Okay? They really and truly do. And I think that should weigh something on this whole process here. I mean, we like the fact that there's this amount of open space in the center of town. But in order for us to maintain it, to maintain our buildings and everything else, to pay our bills, we need to rent it out to have some revenue coming in. Because all we need is a bad fair weekend, and that's it, we're done.
And those have happened many, many times in the
We've had
past
hurricanes.
30 years.
We've had a lot of things down there.
So,
And I mean, I have to say kudos to Group one year that we had the hurricane. Those guys stayed up all night long banging tent stakes in so that next day the fair could open.
so
That's the dedication we have for
but
volunteers.
they brought up this 2 hours per day music restriction.
That would not
which-
work for some reasons.
For the fair, that wouldn't work. For most of the other events, it would be a 5-hour or a 4-hour a day music restriction would not be relevant to you because you'd only go for 2.5 or something.
With the Lobster Fest, I have to honestly say, when the Lobster Fest is there, I haven't been there because we're usually out haying or something, so.
Right.
I honestly can't say that I know exactly how long.
But you think the Lobster Fest is much more music than 2 hours a day?
Yes, I'm asking those that are involved. Yes, they do.
Because I've never been to it for more than 2 hours because I couldn't take it. So
It's too loud.
It was too loud. No, it was too much lobster, really.
But yeah, I think there are some events that would require that it be more than 2 hours. And I think you have to look too at the fact that what the underlying purpose of these organizations that are holding events, what their purpose is. I mean, if it's a nonprofit and the money is going back into the community, I think that's a big plus for everybody. And these events that come in, they support the town in many different ways. They support a lot of the businesses in town. They do support the town in the fact that they have to take out certain permits and everything, and they pay for those permits and whatnot. So there's a lot of pluses with events that are held there. If we, adhere to the 1989 and get, and again, I know Chuck, what Tom was saying about, that you have notice ahead of time. We do post all our events on the website. As soon as we know them, and as soon as I or whoever gets the list, we bring it to get it to our webmaster to get it up on the website. Have there been some last minute inquiries? Yes, there have. So that's what I just wanted to say. But,
Thank you.
you know, as far as back to the buffer, the original question here, I don't think that we should be responsible for putting trees up if trees came down as an act of Mother Nature on somebody else's yard.
Well, unless the noise is increasing from the site, and then the need for a vegetative buffer supposedly increases. So if you've got suddenly 40 days of noise instead of 20, presumably the need for it is more acute. And then the fact that the trees are down becomes twice as much of a problem, or something like that.
Can I ask a question?
Attorney Shansky's anxiously waiting to talk about it, but I thought I'd just let you mention.
Well, I just want to ask a question.
Yeah.
If since 1989, this similar type activities have gone on with musical, and there hadn't been any complaints from anybody, why now?
Well, in 1989, you were doing 2 weeks a year instead of 3.5. Right? 14 days, 15 days instead of 25?
I can't honestly say exactly, but I can tell you.
I was 11, so I'm not sure. I showed up for part of it, but I missed a lot of
There
it.
have been many different events. There had been a mustard down there.
A what?
Like a run mustard at one point in time, way back when.
Oh, yeah.
Way back.
Okay? I mean, you know, so, and believe me, whatever they got for that went back into some community thing. But yes, there have been things that have created noise over the years, and complaints hadn't been there.
Well, also, you know, as much as we don't want to say it, the nature of our town changes a little bit over time, and what was okay 20 years ago may not be okay now. And we sort of change with the times a little bit, I think. No one wants to say that. That's one of
Or the types of events that people want might have expanded.
Yes.
Chairman?
Yes.
It sounds like you're starting to drift into some deliberations on this topic.
I know, and I want to move it along too, and I appreciate that. I have one more question for Attorney Cronin. Sir, there was some sort of an agreement in 2013 for one of the units, one of the pavilions, and in that there was some talk about working things out with the neighbors, I think, and I'm going off of memory. You might remember it better. But since that agreement was made and everyone said, okay, we're going to do this, have there been any events that were in violation of the 1989 agreement?
Of the 1989 agreement?
Yeah, you know, in other words, like you said, we were going to try and work things out with the neighbors. I remember the words when Ray Bauer said them.
Well, let me tell you what I think happened in 2013. The application, the after-the-fact application came before the board to approve 2 structures. The board approved, I'll call it the barn, on a permanent basis, approved the pavilion through the end of the year, and Ray said, go see if you can solve the problems you have with the neighbors. That's what I think happened. The work things out with the neighbors did not come to fruition. There were discussions, but it didn't bear fruit. In my opinion, the status of 2013 is the barn's still approved permanently. That ship has sailed. What's in play right now, well, actually, the other ship sank at the dock, which is the pavilion. It's not allowed anymore. So that's exactly where we are. Whether the discussions with the neighbors went anywhere or not, the barn can stay, the pavilion can't be used, the discussion with the neighbors didn't pan out.
Right, I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, with the intention being that we were going to work with the neighbors and try and make peace, did we in fact put any events on that were not in keeping with the agreement, which would have made things worse?
There were
Going for the
no
barn,
events
right?
that were made part of the agreement, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, no, I'm thinking.
Mr. Chairman, we got to change tapes
Right,
and
I'm
get
sorry.
some other members of the public after the break, but.
Yeah. All right, so why don't we take a break? Let's change the tapes. We won't have any other discussion until the tape comes back on. All right, we're back, and we haven't transacted any conversation or any taking of testimony, and we are going to get back to where we were. Where were we? Ms. Shansky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One clarifying comment. Lest there be any confusion, the condition, the existence or non-existence of Ms. Mack's trees are not relevant. The Ag Society has added a structure to its specially permitted use, and they need to buffer their addition. And that is why a vegetative buffer along and behind that structure for both noise protection and visual reasons is an appropriate condition under your regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chuck.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to report, I did have a discussion with Attorney Cronin during the break, and is he here? And he can correct me if I'm mischaracterizing this. Again, one of the things he said that he believes it's reasonable to impose conditions on the building itself. And in terms of addressing the noise issue, I'm showing the site plan, and we're referring to, I believe this is the pavilion. He agrees that putting he wouldn't object to a condition that you put walls, a requirement that you put walls in the building, and you could put walls on three sides so that the noise, and that itself would act as an acoustical barrier and direct the noise in that direction and away from the mats. And I notice you're shaking your heads. Is that something that you would be interested in?
Yes.
Okay.
Mary Ellen Sullivan on 138 Whitfield Street. I do hear all the events that go on the fairgrounds, and we hear them late into the night. I find the thing that is most concerning is the amount of the expansion of the permit use, or the amount of times, the lack of boundaries restricting the amount of events that can be held in a year during the different durations of the day. And it's interesting, Attorney Cronin made a when he was talked about the permit from 1989 and how the use, it's kind of crept out there. I think the word was crept. And it slowly has crept to other things, and the use has kind of broadened. So that in itself is exactly why we're here, because, it's crept out. So if there's not some kind of boundary established that's more defined within a range that we all agree on, because we know it's a great place and it services great opportunities for all of us. But if there's not a restriction created for that creeping out to continue, where will it stop? And in 10 more years, will we be here again discussing, how it crept out? That we put the walls on the building, but it was pretty awesome because we can open those giant barn doors and everybody pours out into the fairgrounds. Will that be a conversation we have in 10 more years? So in the request of the neighborhood, we're in a fabulous town, we all know that. And I think that we want to continue the right kind of things and support them. But to request that there is a restriction on the number of events is something, I don't want to stamp my feet, excuse me, and say, I'm not going to, if we're going to put a wall up, I'm going to let them put a wall up, versus can we all come up with a common ground and move forward? There's more people involved as we're going forward with this conversation. And obviously, it is of all of our interests to make it the best place it could be. And you know what, by the way, Guilford, you want to make Guilford the best, and it's your town, is your center of your town, and your town green, and your fairgrounds, and your beach. Those are all the things that are the pieces that make Guilford really special. So we don't want to scare away things by creating too many uproars in the wrong times and the wrong places. But if we can come up with something we all agree on and create that boundary so we don't get that creeping for the next 10, 15 years to look back at our special permit that was not defined for the right reasons and the right ways.
Thank you.
I have some questions.
Please join in.
My name is Martha Lombard. I live on Lombard Lane. I believe that time permits are already issued when an event is planned on the fairgrounds. And as far as I know, all events end at 11 o'clock or earlier. And I know the police enforce that. I see the police over there at that given time closing the event down. And I don't know how the permits are issued, you know, who puts those restrictions on the permits, but there are time limits on events. And if the permit, I don't know how one applies for a permit now, whether it goes through this board or through the town hall, and how the Agricultural Society is involved in that. But if that's to change to be a group of people that are approving or disapproving an event, how will that group be set up?
It would probably be us.
Pardon?
It would probably be us.
Okay. And I don't think, and this is from an uneducated mind, that somebody can be told to plant trees or build a barrier on somebody else's property. I don't want, and I would argue with the Agricultural Society, if they wanted to put trees up on the other side of the fence from my house. My fence line is totally open. I am not bothered by the noise. I'm not bothered by the appearance of the fairgrounds at all, and I never have been. And one event that was held several years ago, long before the pavilion was there, was a large musical event, and they had many tents erected on the fairgrounds. And it had the same limits as the fair does, and it went on for a couple of weekends. So that was even before the pavilion was there.
Okay. Wait, no, we have one more guest who'd like to speak.
I'm Barbara Ennis, 800 Drive here in Guilford. The oversight you suggested is something that I'm very much in approval of. I'm very much in favor of the pavilion as well. So we're sure that we have oversight from you gentlemen. I think that satisfies most of us, many of the people at my kind of name.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, the last chance. Anybody else like to add anything in? Any other questions by the commissioners?
I just know the fact that the Jazz Festival, they aren't going to be ever asked back because they ran out on bills that left the Ag Society hanging.
Always get your money first. Always.
Up front. There you go.
All right. Last chance. Last chance.
Well, there's more.
Oh, that's right. Tom has been kind enough.
Just for the record, we also received a letter from Nancy Elderbaum supporting the fairgrounds. We also got a letter from, actually the first selectman got a letter from Susan and Weedy, kind kind of upset with everybody that's been involved with this process. We got a petition that has got approximately 45 signatures on it. And it says, and I don't know that these signatures have been tested by the town to make sure that they're all residents, but I'm trusting that it's fairly accurate. We, the undersigned Guilford neighbors of the Guilford Fair property, support approval of the permit for the building called the Pavilion. And then we got a letter that was addressed to Peter Perugini from Mark P. Nadeau, who is a real estate appraiser. And he apparently, he's saying, in summary, based upon the extensive study of residential properties from the general area that are impacted by community-type involvements where traffic and noise are generated, it is my opinion that your property would suffer a diminution, is that how you say that?
Diminution.
In range value from 15 to 20%. And that's from Mark Nadeau. We got a letter from, oh, that's Nancy. There was also a letter from Philip Schaefer on 85 Boston Street. I think he really was asking us to table this and continue discussion, try and reach compromise. There's a letter here on that. I think that's it.
All right, so I know I had read a bunch of them. I think I read all. Any other questions, gentlemen? Any other input? One last time, anyone want to add anything in? We have one more. Come on down. We'll exhaust every possibility.
I just want to address the letter from Mark Nadeau.
Yeah, do you?
Okay. I do know for a fact that within the past 6 months, there have been 2 properties on Whitfield Street, which abut the fairgrounds, that have sold for over $1 million each. Okay. The properties in the center of town, around the town green, and that have actually increased in value instead of decreased in value. And traffic, everyone knows traffic around the green and that is pretty heavy at many different times of the year. So I would kind of challenge him a little bit on that statement. I happen to deal with this stuff on a daily basis. So I do have a little bit of knowledge on what's going on in town and around the green, as well as market values.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if it's in order, I would like to move that the public hearing be closed.
Please, sir.
I move that the public hearing be closed.
Thomas seconded that?
That was correct.
That's right. You guys are great. You make a good team. Same side. All right, all those in favor? Okay, so we're going to move right into deliberations and discussion here. I'd like to come to some sort of resolution on this.
Can we get your proposal?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do you want to read it?
Let me pass it out, and then there's a lot of whereases. It's not your typical resolution. I thought it was necessary to put a lot of factual stuff in there.
Good.
Have any of the attorneys seen?
No, they're going to see it the same time you are, which is right now. But I'll kind of go through the theory of this, again, is that as I started out mentioning, what we have is an application to remove or modify a condition from 2013 for a barn pavilion. Part of the problem involved here, and I really don't think this is the best occasion or to revisit the entire conditions. Part of which is, even, I think Attorney Shansky admitted, you can put limitations with respect to the use of the pavilion. So, okay, so you put a limitation on the hours or whatever that they can do on the pavilion. So why don't they just move right next door, you know, somewhere else and just put the music there? And I don't know if you could, in this application, prohibit that. Because I think that was sort of her caveat to all this, in the pavilion. What really needs to happen for the bigger picture is there needs to be a modification, if they want to do it, of the conditions of approval, and there can be some horse trading there. Because right now, the access, there are no limits of any hours in this thing. They can theoretically have one under the 1989 permit, and no one can stop them from having one every weekend. You know, it has to be an agricultural, you know, it could be, what is this, auto shows. You know, they can make noise, that's right in there. So they can start renting it out to auto shows, so that they, you know, I don't think they want to do that. But, you know, that's something they can give up, and the other sides can you know, say, well, they got stuff on them because stuff's happened that shouldn't have happened, okay? So that's what they can talk about. But my point is that I don't think this is the case, this isn't the occasion to revisit everything. So what this basically gets to is, and I'll go through this, and what I'll do is I can read it, even though it's kind of long. But the bottom line is going through the history of it and what the findings are, and says that it allows the, it approves the application, it provides that they have to provide 6 months' notice, or provide to the commission a list of a description of all events 6 months in advance, give you guys the opportunity to determine whether in fact this is a permitted use. Because frankly, as I understood the opposition, it was continued that was, you know, they don't know what it is, and they may disagree with that, and there's an uncertainty, and things have happened in the past. You can clear that up. I think you can do that as part of that, because it doesn't limit anything that they've already can do under the 1989 permit. It's just a way of getting clarity on that, which I think helps them and you. And then I added as a third condition, nothing herein shall be construed as prohibiting the Agricultural Society from seeking a modification of the conditions in the 1989 permit. A fourth condition that I could suggest would be applicants shall install walls on 3 sides of the pavilion building, leaving open the eastern side of the pavilion facing the fairground property, just because that came up during the public hearing as a wet method that I think the applicant agreed to, and the opponents agreed that that would be helpful. There may be other conditions you want about screening, whatever. I haven't gotten into that. So anyway, that's sort of the background, and if you want, I can read this to you so everyone, so I can, you know, it's long, but I'll do it if you'd like.
I don't know that you need to read it. What do you mean?
We have to put a motion onto the table for discussion. I was wondering if I could do that.
Please do.
I'm going to read the whole.
Okay, great.
I've experienced the whole. All 8 of the where. Resolution of Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission, Guilford Agricultural Society, 111 Lovers Lane. Whereas the Guilford Agricultural Society is the owner of the property located at 111 Lovers Lane, Guilford, Connecticut. Whereas the uses and activities allowed on the site are governed by a special permit granted by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Agricultural Society on May 17, 1989, which contained the following condition restricting the uses allowed on the property. That the uses of this property be limited to agricultural fairs, crafts, shows, auto shows, and similar activities of a nonprofit nature, and that musical events including concerts are expressly prohibited except as accessory to one of the above activities. This is the third whereas. Whereas on September 4, 2013, following a public hearing, the Commission approved a modification of the 1989 special permit to allow for the construction of 2 barns identified as New Building 2013 and New Pavilion 2013, as shown on General Guilford, Connecticut, dated September 3, 2013, and later revised on 7/1/14 to show proposed buildings, prepared by Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates with the condition that, quote, this special permit is effective for events currently booked until the end of the 2013 season, with the exception of storage, which is permanently approved, parenthesis, hereinafter, quote, the 2013 special permit modification, end quote, end parenthesis. Whereas on September 3, 2014, following a public hearing, the Commission approved a further modification to the 2013 special permit modification to allow a one-time use of the barn pavilion for the duration of the Guilford Fair, including setup and takedown time for the September 2014 season. Whereas by application dated November 17, 2014, the Agricultural Society has requested a further amendment of the 2013 special permit modification to delete the condition limiting the time when the barn and pavilion could be used so as to allow their use on a permanent basis, and also requesting a waiver of the requirements for a site plan and landscaping and architectural plans. Whereas the Commission has held a public hearing on this requested amendment on January 7, 2015 and February 4, 2015. Whereas during proceedings on the 2013, 2014, and 2015 applications, some of the residents living in the vicinity of the area have objected to certain activities that have taken place on the site. Whereas the Commission has recommended that the Agricultural Society meet with objecting neighbors to see if they may be able to reach a consensus as to additional modifications or conditions to the 1989 special permit that would address the concerns of both the Agricultural Society and the objecting neighbors. Whereas the Commission understands that despite a series of meetings between, add an S on the word meeting there, despite a series of meetings between representatives of the Agricultural Society and objecting neighbors, the parties have been unable to reach a consensus as to revised conditions to the 1989 special permit. Whereas the Commission acknowledges that the Agricultural Society has sponsored many civic, social, and recreational activities on the site that have been in accordance with the 1989 special permit and that have enhanced our community. Whereas the Agricultural Society has authorized at least one activity on the site, e.g., not i.e., right? The Renaissance Fair, in violation of the 1989 special permit, and the zoning enforcement officer issued both a cease and desist order and fines for that activity. Whereas the Commission acknowledges that there could be questions as to whether a particular activity is permitted on the site under the 1989 special permit. Whereas the Commission finds that it would be beneficial to both the Agricultural Society and to surrounding neighbors to know in advance whether any particular activity is allowed under the terms of the 1989 special permit. Whereas under Section 273-80D of the regulations, the Commission, when reviewing a special permit application, must review whether, quote, the lot on which the use is to be established is of sufficient size and dimensions to permit conduct of the use of construction, that's right, of the use and construction and maintenance of buildings, structures, and facilities, including sanitary facilities, in a manner that will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or adjacent lots, end quote. Whereas the Commission understands that the uses for the barn and pavilion will be associated and part of the uses occurring on the entire lot, and that uses occurring within the barn and pavilion will require use of the remainder of the lot, such as the parking lot, bathroom facilities, and fields. Whereas the Commission finds that the barn and pavilion would be appropriate for the site on a permanent basis, provided that the uses of the barn and pavilion are in accordance with the uses authorized for the site by the 1989 special permit or any amendments to the 1989 special permit that may be approved by the Commission. Now, therefore, the Commission approves the request to amend the condition of the 2013 special permit modification to delete the condition limiting the time frame for the use of the buildings, and grants the waivers sought for a site plan, landscaping plan, and architectural plan, subject to the following findings and conditions. Number 1, all uses and activities on the site, including uses and activities for the barn and pavilion, shall be in conformance with the condition, add an S again, with the conditions imposed on the 1989 special permit.
By the 19?
Yes. Switch on to by the 1989 special permit. Number 2, in order to ensure that all activities on the site, including activities in the barn and pavilion area, are in accordance with the 1989 special permit, the Agricultural Society shall submit, that's a shall, guys, by the way, as it's drafted, shall submit to the Planning and Zoning Commission a description of all events or special activities that are proposed on the site at least 6 months in advance of the proposed event. It is anticipated that the Commission will review the proposed activities and inform the Agricultural Society if any proposed use is not in accordance with, the conditions at S imposed by the 1989 special permit. The Commission may, but shall not be required to hear comments from the public as to whether any particular proposed event is in conformance with the 1989 special permit. Any party aggrieved by the Commission's decision shall have the right to appeal its decision to the Superior Court. And now for number 3, the barns, the enclosure.
Yeah, it shall be enclosed on 3 walls.
Yeah, applicant shall install walls on 3 sides of the pavilion, leaving open the eastern side of the pavilion facing the fairground property.
Applicant shall enclose walls on 3 sides of the pavilion, leaving open the eastern side of the pavilion facing the fairground property. And that is condition number 3. And for me, condition number 4 is use of the fairgrounds for events shall be limited to 22 days per calendar year. And then number 5 is nothing herein shall be construed as prohibiting the Agricultural Society from seeking a modification of the conditions of the 1989 special permit.
Walter, do we need to separate it in case any one of those are found to be invalid, or shall stand, or we can't do that?
Well, it's number 4, so number 4 could get popped.
Right. So the rest of them shall stand if any of them are struck down.
Chuck, would we need a severability clause for number 6?
You can always say that.
Might as well put it in. Number 6 shall be entitled in capital letters. No? If any conditions of this, resolution of the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission.
I mean, you have an option. The option would be if any conditions found illegal, the whole thing is deemed denied, or you don't have to say that the remaining, she'll stay. There's nothing that says you could have one condition that's illegal and maybe you would have denied the application. I don't know. I don't know what you want to say, but I know what you want to say. You want to say if any condition is struck, the remaining shall remain valid. But you don't have to say that. I mean, you could say
the way we would.
You could say all conditions are integral to this, and if any should be found invalid, the whole thing is denied.
Well, there's a third option too, which is if any are found invalid, then this shall be referred back to the commission for reconsideration.
You can say that. Yeah.
There's no 4th, right? There probably is a 4th.
No,
I just can't think of one.
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah. What they look at when determining whether a commission, say they find a condition invalid, and the court gets it, can they strike the condition so the commission, so it stands without that condition, or do they remand it back to the commission? And one of the things they look at and say, was that condition integral, essential to the decision? So you can say, commission finds all of these to be integral to each condition to be integral to its decision. You can make that as an additional finding, and that would likely result in it being remanded back to you if any were found in there.
If we preferred a remand to an outright denial, making it integral would be adequate?
Yeah.
And land use
You
law?
would say each condition is integral to the decision of this commission.
So
Okay, number six. Number
what
six.
happens- What happens if they have a big thing coming up and they haul it into court and try to challenge it for the time that the event is going to take place? Does the document stand on its own until it's struck down? Or?
No, well, I think they have to appeal it now. I mean, unless the condition is fairly outside, and you've heard arguments that even Attorney Shancy was saying that the limitation should be restricted to the pavilion. And that condition, as you
So
read
this
it,
is, you think
requires
that
the whole
this
site.
is much too risky for
I think
the pavilion?
condition 4 is, you can limit that to the pavilion. I think that's fine. You say the pavilion is limited to 22 events.
Which you already sort of described to us as being.
Yeah, then they just move it somewhere else. That's what I do if I were them. But, you know.
I know we haven't had
Yeah.
a second.
But I have a problem using this to say the entire site is limited to 22 events.
And so this doesn't, so the argument that this single structure represents enough of an expansion of the 1989 permit doesn't hold water for you?
I think it's, I think it's over, I don't know, I'm just giving my reaction. It might work, but I think it's kind of a reach. I mean, even Attorney Shancy was saying that. I don't know.
So the document stand when you get done with this. I don't want to come back to this.
Do you want to have a second so we have a discussion, then we could
Yeah, why don't we, okay, yeah, sorry.
So right now, you're leaving 6 out, Walter. The one about the severability or,
Hold on, wait a second. Here we go.
no, the other one about if anything.
Number 3 is the enclosure, correct? Number 4 is use of the property is limited to 22 days per calendar year. Number 5 is nothing herein shall be construed as prohibiting the Agricultural Society from seeking a modification of the conditions of the 1989 special permit. And number 6 is each condition is integral to this decision.
Correct.
And I'm going to put that in the form of a motion, and then we can discuss it, and then maybe I can remove it or adjust
All
it.
right, I'll second it, and I'd like to make a comment. I think that number 4 and then number 6 should be taken out. I think that I think that by us having the Ag Society come before us all this time, it's going to force their hand into wanting to have a discussion about the 1989 special permit. And I think at some point it might, and I think.
I don't think it is. I think that they're gone. I think that I think they have.
So, but they have to come
approval of
before us.
The barn that they already built, and then it's done.
But if we're looking at the events that, that typically happen, they're suggesting that the jazz festival is no longer going to happen. They're suggesting that the other
Jazz Festival
Oktoberfest
hasn't happened in like a decade.
Well, whatever else it is, there are a lot of events that happen there right now that's no longer going to happen at the.
I just think we're going to end up in a world of permanent emergency. And the reason I think that we're going to end up that way is because we've already seen that across the last couple of years. Each time we've needed something, each time the Ag Society has needed something additional, they've come before us. In one instance, the night after,
fault because we set these, we didn't finish.
The night after they started working on putting together the fair was the last time that they showed up here. And I mean, honestly, they're very busy, and I think that we can provide clarity to them now. If this is too tight, the reality is
Well,
that...
where did you get that from? It's not in the 1989 agreement.
That's correct. It's on the basis of the expansion of the uses that are possible based on the new pavilion. Now, of course, I understand that, if they appeal it, they appeal it, but The truth is that at some point, because it's not exactly like a baby elephant, that as Attorney Shansky was describing it, it can just keep expanding
Well,
forever.
you're right,
It can
it can.
expand up to 365 days in a year.
Right, and not just
I
one.
mean, and, Attorney Cronin used the same kind of language in the sense that, it has crept. And ultimately, I think that the neighbors need some certainty about how far it will creep. Now, it's understandable to me, the thing is that the Ag Society ultimately doesn't want to use it that much. The Ag Society is an all-volunteer organization, and the Ag Society is currently using it for, I think, 19 days a year. But I put in 22. Now, if we want to give lots of extra breathing room, then that would be 28. But the reality is that a day limitation is both enforceable and clear for both sides. So the neighbors can be sure that it will actually happen, because enforcement at that level is something that even we can achieve. And also, simultaneously, the Ag Society can be sure that what they're doing isn't exceeding it, because they can look at a calendar and count.
Well, we have our counsel, and we have two other attorneys say that they don't think that this is necessarily an appropriate legal action that we're taking.
I think it is actually within our purview, especially if it's reasonable.
The fact of the matter is, they could have activities in anything but the pavilion, so isn't the condition somewhat moot just by that
Putting the
fact?
condition on the pavilion would be moot. But the fact that the pavilion has entered the equation really, I think, means that they have truly expanded the use of this of the grounds.
So his language is saying 22 days for the whole
For
site,
the
not
calendar
just the
year,
pavilion.
for the site. Now, if that's too onerous, amending it to say 29 days, which is well past anything they've ever used it for, is something that they wouldn't be interested in appealing, because it's not something they're interested in dealing with.
So you're proposing limiting activities on the site in lieu of activities to just the pavilion, which
Correct.
is what's before us.
And if, for instance, if I were to say amend it to 29 days, the Ag Society in all of history has never used it for a full 29 days. So that condition is the opposite of onerous, probably moot, and it only starts to function if it turns out that the neighbors, it only starts to function if the Ag Society drastically attempts to increase its usage of the site, which they've professed to us all across that they don't want to do. And this kind of amendment to the special permit would certainly be in order. Now, tonight, although it may be possible that this is not in order for this particular pavilion, although I think it still is, because it expands the use of the site, like I said. If it's 29 days, it's of very little interest to the applicant, and it's of some significant interest to the neighbors, because then they have the assurance of a limitation.
Yeah, what kind of limitation is that? If they're at 22 days and they're going to go up to 29?
It's an assurance about the box that the baby elephant's in.
I think that we're taking too big of a legal step. The attorney that's going to be defending this, I know what you're saying here, that 29 days, there's no way that they're going to blow their money to pay Attorney Cronin, who I'm sure is very capable at bringing this action, but the logic, that's just poor logic.
They
to say
also,
that-
I also think that they would fail, but additionally, I think that the Ag Society
But that's
can
not
handle
what,
it.
that's
and
not what
will be
our,
comfortable
but that's not
with
what
it.
our attorney thinks. Our attorney thinks they would succeed. And he's the one that would be defending us.
He's drafted this.
Am I mischaracterizing you?
I think it's, right now, they can, there's no limit on the number of days.
Correct.
And the condition has to be reasonable in accordance with what's being applied for. So in theory, right now, they can have something 300 days a year, because there's no limitation. And now we're limiting it to 22, based on a pavilion.
That's right.
And I mean, if I'm done, that's my argument. You know,
And this is
the counter argument is, and I tried to put, you know, I quoted a reg that said we get to consider the whole lot. I mean, that's in the whereas somewhere. I know the arguments I'd make in response to that.
Yeah, they're actually in the...
Yeah, they're in the resolution.
They're in
you
the
know,
resolution.
And
I value those. I just think that they are actually enough.
I think, you know, if you limit the pavilion, you know, that is a restriction. I had absolutely no problem if you limited it to the pavilion.
But from an equitable standpoint, we are still not...
I just think, I would hope that some other occasion where they're actually seeking to amend the conditions when it's not about a permit, but, because I think there may be, there's good reason. I think they essentially admitted we may want to do it. You heard his Attorney Cronin say they may fire me for saying this, but I think we need to do it. I think there is some momentum for them to do that, and that's the occasion. They come in with an application, we want to change the conditions. Whether or not they have the agreement of the neighbors, then it's open door. Then you can, you know.
That's
look at
why I
whatever.
don't think that they're actually going to...
They may not.
Show up. I mean, not in the near term, of course. Over time,
Right.
I think that it's inevitable, but...
Let me jump in with one other thing. So the fair is a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but the folks that set up the fair get there a week beforehand and are camping out.
Correct.
So is that going towards the 22 days, or like the time that
In the
the
case
board
of
has?
used, I put that in to the 22 days because there are 12 days of fair setup and takedown in total. 14 maybe.
I'd like to see number 4 stricken.
Why don't we
Yeah.
just see if there's a consensus here, because I'm not gonna vote for the 22 days.
Would you go for 30?
No, not right now.
You wouldn't vote for a number at
I
all?
won't right now. I would if it was,
If it was limited, maybe like what?
Well, if
Chuck
this is a
saying.
new application.
And let me ask one more question, if I could. So, in according to this as well, any event needs to come before us, whether it falls into that criteria. It's a 501c3 nonprofit event. It's still going to come before us, even though it clearly falls into that category. They still have to bring it to us.
Right.
That's right.
But we can't be arbitrary and capricious and just say, no, I don't want you to do that, no, I don't want you to do that, no. Well, it has to be reasonable and conform.
So,
to the
in
plan.
essence, when it's time for the fair, they're going to come before us with the fair.
Right, as they should have been.
So,
Well, they'll, yeah.
so like I said, then I would definitely move to get rid of number 4
And number 6.
and number 6.
Well, if we could have.
Yes, 4 and 6 would be the ones to go.
Question.
All right.
So, and you guys would not be comfortable with, for instance, 30 days, which is more than they've ever dealt with,
Not
No.
unless you're limiting it to the
Pavilion.
To the pavilion.
which is just weird for them.
Yeah, which wouldn't work anyway.
I mean,
so
it would just leave them in a weird
Yeah,
place.
I mean, the pavilion is close to the objecting neighbor's property, so maybe they wouldn't care if it was off the, I don't know. I
Okay.
don't.
All right, amending the motion to strike numbers 4 and 6 and renumbering number 5, which is nothing herein shall be construed, to be number 4.
So we have this as it stands plus the sides on the barn.
Correct. Number 3 is the 3 sides on the barn, and number 4 is nothing shall be construed from prohibiting the Ag Society from seeking modifications.
Yeah.
Patrick, I have a question. Yes. What's the status of events that have been booked or planned that today, within 6 months, that would be planned to occur before 6 months from today or tomorrow?
What kind of website you got to come
Are those going to be, are we going to create, I guess what I'm suggesting is if we create some kind of process for reviewing them?
Yeah, why don't we say that in the next 6 month
I
period?
know for particular, the Lobster Fest is scheduled for June 20th. And I believe that's less than 6 months from now.
So why don't we say for the next 6 month period, they have a 60-day window to come to us, and that way there's, it's reasonable. We're here every 2 weeks. It's not like, oh, we have to wait a month. Every 2 weeks we're here, so why don't we give them 60 days for the next 6 months?
Okay. All right.
Events that are planned to occur, like between now and 6 months from now, that you have a 60-day window to
Yeah.
propose.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable, Chuck?
Condition number 5, any events
Currently booked prior to.
I assume there's nothing within the next 60 days.
Yeah, any events currently booked.
In the snow, it's a snow fest.
Yes, right. Any events currently booked which shall occur before July 30th, 2015, the Agricultural Society shall submit within 60, at least 60 days in advance of the proposed event, to use the same language.
You okay, George?
Sounds reasonable.
Is that
Chuck?
Yep.
Feeling good? Frank, can you support it?
Yep.
No? George, you okay with it in principle? All right. You ready?
Call a question.
All those in favor of this as proposed? Aye. Okay, so that carries unanimously. And hopefully this will resolve this issue to everyone's satisfaction. Thank you all very much for your input.
Before you do your receipts, can you move to item F?
Yes, sorry. Sorry, it's 10:30. I don't know where the time goes when we're doing this, but it just flies. Okay. Status report on plan of conservation development, Malone and McBroom Consultant.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
My name is Allie Church. I am a consultant from Mylona McBroom, and I've been helping the Plan of Conservation and Development Committee work on a draft of the report. The first page that you'll see is our schedule, a draft schedule. At this point, the idea is that we will have it completely adopted by the due date, which is the end of the fiscal year, so June 30th. This is tentative. You'll see that there's we've just given you a special, and we've, lost this cover. We've just given you a special meeting. That can all change. Here's one for you guys. So just briefly, some things. I want to talk quickly about the people on the committee. MJ Kessler is our chair. We also have Shelley Green, Steve Cobbs, Al Przicki, along with George Carl, Kevin Mickey, and Brian McGlone, who are town staff members. So they've been working on this for about 3 years at this point. I came in only a couple months ago to get kind of all of their consolidated notes together into this draft for review. And what you're seeing is, at this point, our best idea, things that won't change, and that's why we're giving this draft to you guys ahead of time for comment, are the general goals and strategies. This document's organized around 8 goals, and within each of them strategies. Those will stay generally. Things that we do expect to change before our next meeting, which we hopefully will get on the schedule for March 18th. Things that we're expecting to change are some of the action items. You'll see there's a lot of them. They're not necessarily assigned to the actor at this point. We haven't determined for all of them if they're short-term, long-term. Things like that will change. There are some final map edits. And those are specific parcels. Mostly what we're working on, and it's myself and Kevin at this point, is classifying town land. You classify your land as A, B, or C, depending on its use. And so I'm just going through with Kevin on the final edits to that, making sure we have that complete. And that may change some of the land use tables, so you may see some of those numbers shift just slightly. We haven't yet finalized our future land use plan, which is really the plan that comes at the end of this. So we get all of our goals together, and then we get that in a plan that is the advisory thing for zoning changes in the future, if you choose to make the changes on that. So we'll have that, and that future land use plan also leads directly into the compatibility with state and regional plans. So we can't really do those until we have a final draft on that. So just briefly switching back to the schedule, state statute 8-23 requires that you do a POCD update every 10 years. And it also requires what you see on the far right-hand side is the 65-day review period. So we're proposing that on March 18th, we bring this document back to you. We get feedback from you guys. Prior to this, we've also have a website up. You can go to the Plan of Conservation and Development Committee's website, and there's email address. You can see all our draft documents on there.
So Ally, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, absolutely.
There are parts of this that would prevent me from supporting this document
Mhm.
at all.
Yep.
How would we go about striking them from this before we would even consider it?
So what happens, and if you flip back to the schedule, what happens is you can submit, as individuals who we're inviting at this point to submit, you can submit individual comments to it prior to this March 18th, and we can review them as a committee. But as the commission, you have 2 formal opportunities to strike things.
So
one being-
I could campaign with the commission to not pass
Exactly.
the document at all?
So you could either do that, at all, yeah, absolutely. And I can give you, I have just one copy, but I can pass you, this is the staff report, including what the commission's allowed, and you can take this, I have more.
That's okay.
But it's what you're allowed to pass. You can pass all of it, none of it, or parts of it.
I would pass
Okay.
none of it.
None of it?
Well, if they're going to put things in limiting planning and zoning's power, I just can't condone it. I would stop it all, and I would campaign for it. On camera.
On a narrower, less histrionic note, I was just wondering about the, I was wondering about a few of the provisions in here that, that might not have been carried forward into other parts of the document, essentially, or carried backward into earlier parts of the document. Obviously, with something as broad as a plan of conservation and development, it's always going to sound in places like it may be contradicting itself.
Yes.
But with edits as simple as, we've had a problem here where the entire document is never discussed. Often the document at all has not obviously been discussed, but more often,
we're sorry,
when it's referred to, an individual section is referenced.
Right.
And that section obviously is colored in large part by other sections that mysteriously disappear under certain circumstances. So when we're looking for edits when we're looking for cross-referencing or other kinds of edits like that, it looks like right now these are very much produced, sort of connecting to each other.
Yes.
I mean, sort of one after the other.
Well, we've tried to address that in 2 ways. One, and it's part of the thing that's not done, for each of the actions, and if you flip to any random page and see these blue, or in the middle, you have to go towards into the meat of the document, but there are these blue kind of tables with the borders. The far right-hand column is goals, and that's meant to suggest where they cross to other ones. So the idea for that is that you pull them out and you know that one cross-references. Again, we haven't gotten to the point where we've filled all that. The other is that all of these actions are then repeated in an action agenda at the end. And so they're all repeated, but they're grouped at this point, not by section, but by who we're assigning them to. And so the Board of Selectmen are first, and so these are all of their things. And then finally, and this was part of the reason that a consultant was hired, is the idea, and this is just a draft at this point, that all of this will get consolidated into a document that's this thick, literally, and that summarizes it all, partly to be a marketing document, but also so that people can't grab one section and say, I read it. Hopefully, the idea is that you read the whole shortened summary version and understand.
Are you saying that there may be some parts of it that are inconsistent with other parts, or contradictory to other parts? Because there's an emphasis, there's one section that talks about natural resources and protection of natural resources, another section talks about economic development, and depending on, exactly how you read it, you could say that, well, that recommendation in economic development might not be consistent with this other recommendation on natural resources. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking?
That was sort of a classic example, but there's also determining which kinds of development are particularly beneficial to the town. And we have, in general, we have a bunch of, I read a slightly earlier version of this that I don't know exactly how it lines up with this, but we talk about what kinds of development would be especially beneficial, or what what economic goals the town has. For instance, decreasing the pressure, the property tax pressure on residents, which can be done in various ways. And we don't discuss what kinds of things will effectively do that and how effective they will be. For instance, the rock pile was just approved, and one of the common discussion points on that was the broadening of the tax base that we discussed. How much has something big like the rock pile reduced the tax burden on property owners because we approved it? Now that we've approved it, how much has it reduced the property tax burden on property owners? And also, what would be the expected results of us committing similar actions in the future? For instance, when we approve a new zone like that, what I call the mega TS2 on the extreme west end of town, which was done by quoting 3 lines of our 2002 Plan of Conservation Development partly. How much does that relieve the burden on property owners in town? By what percentage are property taxes for, say, a median or average homeowner reduced?
Do you figure out how much taxes it generates and then figure out the town's resources that are spent to support it?
Or even just how much revenue it generates would be a start. But also, in general, we're looking for ways to define our goals when it comes especially to commercial development.
Right, so you're saying if it generates $200,000 a year in taxes, overall, the impact on each house might be $1.50 for the year.
Well, if it's $200,000, it would be like $0.015. But yes.
Well, here's the point, I think the point we want to make with respect to your role in this right now. Now is the time for you to really get into this document, the document that you have right now, and tell us, not collectively yet, as Ally said, but individually, if there are areas of concern, particular statements that are made, or proposals that are made. Let us know what they are and how you would like to see it either eliminated or modified. And then also, if there are additional things that you think should be in here that aren't in here, along the lines you're just suggesting.
Then how do we do that, George? How do we tell you which things should come out or which things?
There's a variety of ways. There's the email that we have set up, or you can let me know, or probably for you all, since you're the most important actors in this whole process. Let me know, hope preferably in writing, or not, if you want to come and talk to me about it, exactly what you're thinking, so that I can then transfer.
Well, okay, so while we're here, we just had an instance where the actual input of planning and zoning is being used to alleviate things that got out of control in the thing that took 3 hours to talk about tonight.
Right.
And yet, we're taking that out of the equation in this document for future consideration. In here, we're trying. No, you're not recognized.
Okay, well, we have to meet, just let me know, show me, I'm not.
Well, page 64, where we're talking about consider revisions to the zoning code to reduce the number of projects requiring approval of special permits by the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's the very nature of the special permit that allows us to control what's going on at the fairground. It is the very mechanism that we use tonight to help make these neighbors be able to enjoy their property. And this document is recommending that we remove that. I have a problem with that.
Specifically that, I understand what you're saying, yes.
Reduce it.
So if there are other, the more specific you can be as to exactly what is troubling you, that more easily we can, either modify it or point out the argument for it and try to convince you otherwise. But again, that's what we really need from you right now.
So when it comes down to it, we're going to have to.
Eventually, we're going to
vote on
asked to vote on it up or down as.
And if whoever drafted this says, gee, planning and zoning, we're really sorry, but this is standing, you vote on this in total the way it is, tough beans.
Well, no, you are ultimately the authors of it, you, the commission.
So we can strike out
Strike, yeah,
specific,
absolutely.
Strike any item.
if something, some specific area.
But we would do that as a group.
Yeah, so you would do that on your schedule, so you would hold the public hearing, 65, we present it to you, you would hold the public hearing, we have to keep it open for 65 days, then as with any, you would do what you did tonight, which is add in.
If there were things that really, the consensus of the commission was not to include it, we wouldn't have to wait until the public hearing to remove it. We can remove it right now.
So
But you wouldn't want us to remove something that you thought should be removed, that everybody else in the commission thought should stay in, right? I mean,
So,
Yes, we will.
we all want to take our power away. We all want
so you should have,
We all want to forsake the people in town and just have development go on. We don't want to say a word about it. That's what we want to do. That's why we're here at 10:45 at night.
George, I had a quick question, if I might interrupt. The purpose of this is just a proposal for suggestions in the future? Is that what this is?
a plan,
Can you explain? Well, I just want to hear what.
Well, there's probably a clear expression in state laws of what the purpose of the plan of conservation is.
And then we kind of reiterated that on page 4, you can see where we.
The town has to have a plan of conservation.
And then how is that plan followed, generally speaking?
That's entirely up to you, whether you follow it or not. I mean.
And then what
It's
happens?
completely an advisory, it doesn't have,
Exactly,
yeah,
and
it's
then
an
what happens
advisory
if we
document.
don't follow it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
So then realistically, where it says in the document that we're going to give up our powers on special permits and other things,
That's only
that's just saying that, and
And
it's
we've
really
also
just
we've
total
also
nonsense.
tasked you with doing that to yourself as well, so it's.
So what does this really mean?
Well, I mean, I think in the lawyers in the room would, so at some point, if you did exactly the opposite of your 10-year plan and changed zoning to do that, you could say that you're going completely against your adopted plan, and
So it does
therefore
have
you
some
can't
power.
change the
There should be a
zoning.
guide to what you want to do, and there should be a guide to the public and citizens of the town who want to read about what you all think about our future. So to be meaningful, it should be a guide, but it doesn't mean, it's not a law, literally.
So by adopting something that makes us give up most of the power that in this particular case allowed us to protect the citizens around fairgrounds, by giving that up, do you think the people of Guilford know that that's in this plan? Do you think that the regular citizens that are in that camera right now
I don't
are
read
saying,
that
oh,
section quite that strongly myself.
am I reading it wrong? These are simple words. It says, get rid of special permits.
No, it doesn't.
Well, I'll reduce it, right.
That particular language.
There may be some special permits.
Reduce the number of projects
Might be
requiring
modified.
special permits.
We're making the consultants suffer for language that.
How did that even get in
It's
there?
been in there for at least 6 months.
It was wrong then, it's wrong now.
I'm not saying it's not, I'm
It
just.
could be, there are certain types of uses that shouldn't be special permit. Maybe those things shouldn't even be allowed at all. Or maybe they should be allowed by site plan without special permit. That's what it's saying. It's saying that there's some, that there could
And
be.
who would make that decision, George?
You, the planning and zoning commission. If it's something that requires a special permit and you want to say that we're not going to allow this by special permit anymore, we're not going to allow it at all, then you have to amend the zoning code to do that. Or if you have something that's by special permit that you want to allow by right, you have to do that by your action. What this is saying is that in the author's opinion, there are some types of special permits, and there probably are some, where the commission doesn't really need to to make a special permit anymore.
And theoretically, they could have said, oh gee, I think that the fairgrounds should really operate 365 days a year, and I really want to sort of say that in this document, so they're on page 65.
Document even mentions.
Maybe the suggestion would be if there are specific special permits that you think would be more appropriate in other, I mean, whatever they might be. There've got to be
The
some.
problem is, if we approve this document,
No, right, no,
Right, but
we don't have to approve it as a whole, we can
And you've also
modify
been
elements of
given,
it.
again, so we're giving this to you very, very early, partly knowing that your schedule with hearings coming up. But the idea is that there are, literally a month and a half just to get informal comments. And so if we can get that process going so that we get these things out before it even becomes a public document, a public final draft.
I just have 4 things that I'd like to refer to refer over to the consultant and to the POCD commission at this time.
Write down.
I think, yeah.
We have to write these down. You just lost the tape later, or could you email these?
Yeah, I could email them to you too.
Try to digest them right now.
I saw the December version of this document. The reference to NIMBYs, I think, is in poor taste.
That gets out too, I think.
But I assume, no, well, it's in this copy, I just looked, because it's reasonably insulting and also.
How did that even get in there? Like, who put that in there?
So part of
Steve.
this was going
He
through
put it in there?
a very rough draft,
Steve
and then me taking my, some of it is,
So we actually have the draft document of the town of Guilford that refers to NIMBYs. Is that true?
It's a draft document.
That should be moved.
The special permit references, I think, are also ill-advised, and I think a majority of this commission will end up feeling the same way. But that's a little more of an open question, Tom. What was the question?
Sleeping here.
Well, he'll have plenty of time to review it earlier in the night.
Tell me again so I can be upset, all right?
You'll have like 5 more shots at me. I said global warming is real, Tom. That's what I said.
Oh, yeah. Well,
no, number 3.
That's why we only have 35 inches of snow.
This is a more substantive thing that is not truly in here. I would like, there are references to types of development that are beneficial, and I would like to hear from the consultant what types of development are especially beneficial to a town like Guilford's. Towns
Do you
with,
have a reference in the text for that?
it's early,
Or what section is it in?
I've got,
All these bad things are probably in the economic development section.
It's a miracle how that happens.
I use bad, but.
oh, well, yeah, actually, it could go, you're right. For instance, on page 36 and 37, it would be appropriate, possibly appropriate, or slightly before that, say page 33 with grow the grand list. Those might be appropriate places to describe the types of development that are especially desirable for a town like Guilford.
Also, how they determine that.
And the types of ways that you determine that. I know that you've done economic development plans in the past, and it would be nice to have a significant section that involves that. In terms of growing the grand list and reducing the tax burden on residents, I would like to see somewhere in the document exactly how and how much different types of commercial development reduce the tax burden, would reduce the tax burden on residents in Guilford.
So what
And I
about using
assume
the Rockwell as this particular one?
Right, and I assume that recent increases or recent approvals by P&Z might be one of the more appropriate yardsticks for that, but I assume that you guys have other tools at your disposal. And
we may have, if there are things that require special studies and project to resolve, we may not be able to do that right now.
Right.
We might be able to recommend in the plan, for example, that some kind of group study.
Right.
Or we could hold up.
I was trying to sneak that in because we have this consultant that's done like 500,000 a year.
Right, so we have a very limited budget on what we can actually do with this particular project.
We have input from MJ.
The chair.
Well, I just wanted just to say 2 things in light of the current conversation. One is that the advantage of this document is that it coordinates land use policy among not only your commission but others. And what's helpful is if groups like the Agricultural Commission could be involved with EDC, with planning and zoning, and sort of trying to get people together to solve, issues that like those that we discussed tonight. And so that's the real benefit of this. And a lot of those different groups have participated in the writing of this. So although it's great sport at this type of hour to pick the little highlights out, I don't know that that's really the most useful way to read
It's still
the
very
document.
early. It's early. It's almost 11.
Yeah.
Those last two were just things that I couldn't find in the earlier
No,
draft.
and I
that I'd seen.
appreciate that. And that is the kind of stuff that we want to get out now before, this has been really a working draft for a long time. There are things that, we glaze over and shouldn't be. So we appreciate your thoughtful reading of it.
I also assume the Ag Commission in this case won't mind the removal of NIMBYs.
Well, they have been formed since this document was last updated, so that's a new thing, that we have an agricultural commission, and they're very active, and they just published a pamphlet that locates all the farms in the, in the town. There's a lot of good stuff that's in here. But the other thing I wanted to say is, right now, the current zoning of the town is predominantly residential. I'm sure this is not news to you. So if you're expecting that there's going to be any sort of significant commercial growth that will make that not so, you will be, misled, because this town is funded on residences. And although there might be commercial growth that will help offset that, right now, that's not the way our town is zoned. It would
Does
be
this
completely-
show that the percentage of that funding? Because
There are some
yeah.
graphs that illustrate that.
So
Yeah, mine
I'm
didn't
trying
have the cool graph.
I'm trying to understand, all the energy that we put into economic development,
Yes.
is that having any effect if we're still mostly reliant on residential?
No, absolutely it is. And there are other towns who have chosen residential development as a type of economic development, and that might be the case here.
Huh. Yeah, I would like to see like the impact of particular, things that we get excited about, like the rock pile, and see what the real impact is on regular property owners' tax bill. Because the truth is if it really is only $1.50 a year, then I don't know. That's kind of misleading.
Right. So I guess that was my point, is that to the point where we take this discussion and work together to understand the issue with clarity, the better the outcome will be. And so I do appreciate your efforts.
Yes, we appreciate yours.
Thank you.
We will read it close.
Do you guys want to have anything to say?
I'd love to.
I figured you might. Want to give you as much time as I can.
I don't want to spend a lot of time tonight on a few of the little details. And even to give you all the economic analysis, let's use the rock pile. Let's back up. Our town budget and school budget are about $85 million right now, plus or minus a little bit.
Together?
Yeah. We go up about 3%. It's about $2.5 million. So economic development is not going to offset it all the way. We're going to dent it. The rock pile's $500,000. When that's up and running, we're going up about $2.5 million. We got $500,000 that's coming from the rock pile that's going to reduce that much as an impact, as an example.
So 85 million and $500,000, so that's 2.5%.
I'm saying we tend to go up around 3%. I'm using round number, 2.5, 3, it's somewhere in that range. It's about $2.5 million. So without the rock pile's $500,000, the consumer, the retail, the residential will be absorbing that extra $500,000.
Right, so in my house, it would be $3 a week. I have the rock pile in town for $3 a week.
If you want to look at it that way.
Or you could leave it as a dump.
Yeah.
And don't promote anybody coming into Guilford.
Or we could have the East River Preserve that costs us $500,000 a year for 20 years. And what's that cost? Is it the same $3 a week, I guess, if we're going to do that?
Yeah.
So we'd rather go out and walk, maybe, instead of have something that's trying to help offset us. And it's a cumulative effect. The broad phrase in there is economic development is something that generates more revenue than it costs to bring it in. And while we think about retail or commercial establishments, frankly, going forward, okay, you just approved the Arrow Apartments, for example. It's more residential. It's giving up an industrial site for residential, but I supported that. It's the right thing to do. 66 High Street, which is an industrial property, is intended to become condos, more residential. So we have to look at what our town is, what it can be. It is a residential community. We bounce between 6 and 7%, and we can't generate enough shopping centers, retail centers, medical centers or any of those kinds of places to offset $2.5 million a year.
So-
And that's what we're trying to do.
So it's a residential community, it's not an agricultural community.
It is a residential community.
Yes, it is.
If you look at our agricultural numbers and acreage, what is it, 6 or 7% of the town is agricultural farmland. So, I mean, the reality is it's 7%. Our history was based on agricultural, but today, the numbers of people working there and the revenues that are generated are probably nowhere what it was 100, 150 years ago.
Even 20 years ago. And
Okay.
that was what I was getting at with our different expectations. 20 years ago, we were more of an agricultural than we are today, and 20 years from now, we may be even less.
We might.
And so when you have things like the fairground in the middle of a residential area, what people put up with and said, well, it's agricultural, it's Guilford. Now, what people's expectations are is changing. What I didn't say when I moved into town is I moved next to Bishop's Orchards, and they were spraying this crazy white powder that was killing all the plants in our yard. And I spoke to the bishops, and they said, it's an agricultural community. You move next to a farm. What do you expect? So,
We do have a couple more things we need to do.
oh, okay, you're
Okay.
going off on a tangent. Sorry.
So, you got everything you need out?
I think so. So get comments to George would be
Yes.
great, and otherwise I'll see you on the March 18th.
I want to make a couple of quick points. And the first is that although we might get $500,000, or I'm going to use that figure, in the Rothschild, okay, that brings people into town. That helps the restaurants. That helps the overall economy. It's not just that one piece of property. The second thing is that as we have more residents, we need more services here in town to serve them. Economic development. Nobody is saying, you started off by saying two things were a non-starter, and it sounds like you're almost sort of saying, we're trying to say, you and Walter, we're paving the town over. We want to see that, okay? We're not, okay, wait a minute, hold on.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I didn't say that.
Okay, because one of the things that you mentioned about, taking away your authority, and I know that you have objected to a recommendation that actually originated from staff at Town Hall South, not from us, all right? And you have good staff, and so, listen to them.
And you know what, Steve, thank you. And I will always support your getting your point across. To your point, though, we dealt for 3 hours tonight with a situation where staff got a little overwhelmed and, maybe things got pushed along. So I really believe in a strong and powerful planning and zoning, because we're not beholden to anyone. As you can see, we'll sit here all night long until we're comfortable with what we're doing.
I had never the slightest inclination of weakening that, and I would agree with you that that's...
And the people of Guilford love you for it. And I'm telling them right now, people of Guilford love that. So great, wonderful. All right, we have this, okay, where are we?
The applications to be received.
Good.
Tom?
Can I just, real quick,
Go with it.
talk about the calendar? Give me a minute of the calendar. This is supposed to be done by June 30th.
That's the end of the fiscal year.
When is the coastal resilience plan supposed to be done?
Next week.
And I can clarify that, so, and a quick order though of what happened. So that's actually, going to amend the 2002 POCD, and so we have placeholders in this to address that.
They have highlighted placeholders for places where the coastal resilience plan will affect.
Just the order of it starting, it actually is starting, it started prior, and so you're amending the prior POCD.
So is there a placeholder for eminent domain?
They've left, the Malone and McBroom has left open the possibility that you will convince a certain percentage of people that sea level rise is not taking place. And if you do that, then that'll be blanks. But they also have the opportunity to put in the coastal resilience plan if, by some miracle, it is actually approved.
It is not in there, in that draft.
It is not currently present.
NIMBY.
Maybe it's for not to go to the.
Okay. Applications to be received. Are you okay, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Applications for coastal area management site plan, Town of Guilford, Oaks Point, map 3 and 4, lot, I can't read. The zone section was hit.
318.
318. Erosion control devices and safety, that Guilford Dam will protect adjacent to wetlands and construction, receive and set date. Public hearing date of 3/18, is that a good date for everybody?
So moved.
Second, in regard to what we have coming up with the plan of conservation development and also the coastal resilience, is 3/18 working? I mean, I have no problem staying here until 2 in the
Yeah,
morning.
we'll do the best we can.
Okay, so did someone want to?
Yeah.
Frank moved in second.
And I seconded.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Aaron J. Flynn, 124 Neck Road, map 25, lot 5, zone R6. Demolition of the existing home, ZBA approval granted 12815 to construct home with 22.07 lot coverage, received into public hearing date for 3/4/15.
Make that 318 also.
3/18.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we did that. Approval of bills, short publishing, $63.60.
I'll move it.
Second.
Got that one. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of minutes. Okay, so, George, we had to supplement some of our minutes.
You have that in the 1/7/15 minutes, you got it tonight. We beefed up those minutes on the, that was the first ag public hearing.
Did any of you have an opportunity to read the minutes that we got tonight?
I did review them, but I don't know if everyone else did. I would be comfortable making a motion, but if no one else is.
I did, I'll second that.
Is that the one where
They just put it in here, I was reading through.
is that the one where you were,
Just 9 pages.
abstaining versus?
No,
we
no,
continue
this,
it.
that we can do, this is last week's.
The original minutes that we approved at the last meeting were very truncated, didn't have much at all in them.
Okay.
Now, we've gone through our normal practice of identifying the speakers and who presented what, which is included in that 1/7.
So, Frank, you read it, Josh, you read it, Walter, Richard, anyone else? You all
I'm
read it?
happy.
You happy? All right, so, all those in favor of accepting the 121:15 minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
One abstention.
There you go. 117 meeting minutes, the 17 is the
That's
revised.
one before.
Okay. And the 121?
That's just regular minutes.
That's just a
Okay.
regular
Did we review the 121 minutes?
Yes. I'll move to accept the 121 minutes. The revised, because that was, yes.
Those are the regular ones.
Yes,
Those are not revised.
I will, yes, I will move to accept those.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, with no further business before the commission, I'd like to adjourn at 11:04.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.